Good evening. I'd like to call the business meeting of August 9th, 2021 to order. Before we get started, I just want to go over some rules of decorum. We have a large crowd here tonight with passionate viewpoints. We will offer time for public comment at the beginning and the end of the meeting, and we will listen to all of you. But in order to conduct this meeting efficiently, fairly, and with full participation, we need the audience to adhere to rules of order and decorum. No person or group shall disrupt the proceedings of tonight's meeting. No person in the audience shall engage in disorderly or boisterous conduct, including the uttering of loud, threatening, or abusive language, whistling, stamping of feet, or other acts which disturb, disrupt, and otherwise impede the orderly proceeding of the meeting. Any person who is disruptive or not following the rules of order will be given a warning and, if necessary, be asked to leave the meeting. I appreciate all of you respecting these rules tonight. And with that, we'll move on to item 102 and roll call. Ms. Widener, please.
Mrs. Evans-Brockett?
Here.
Dr. Hallis?
Here.
Dr. Howell?
Here.
Here.
Mrs. Lofton?
Here.
Mrs. Nares?
Here.
Roberts?
She's here via Zoom.
She's here via Zoom.
Yes.
Dr. Weston?
Here.
Ms. White? Here.
Item 1.03, if you'll rise for the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Item 1.04, the reading of the PVSD mission statement. The mission of the Perkiomen Valley School District is to cultivate an inclusive community of learners empowered to grow intellectually, socially, and emotionally. 1.05, I'm looking for a motion to approve the agenda as presented.
Second.
Have a motion and a second. Are there any questions? Seeing none, all those in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion carries. Item 1.06, I need a motion to approve the minutes of July 12th and August 2nd, 2021.
So moved.
We have a motion and a second. Are there any questions? Seeing none, all those in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion carries. Item 1.07 is comments on any topic. The Board of Directors of the Perkiomen Valley School District accepts public comments from those that live or work in the district. Public comments should be addressed to the board, not to the audience, in accordance with the law and board policy and procedures. In a moment, anyone who would like to make a comment can come up to the lectern, and before presenting your comment, you must state your name and your municipality of residence and/or the district building where you're employed. Each speaker is limited to 3 minutes, and Dr. Russell will project a timer. Opportunity for public comments are included now and again during the closing section of the board agenda. No speaker will be permitted to comment more than once during each of these sections, so you can comment once at the beginning and once at the end. The board president shall maintain control of all meetings and may terminate a participant's comments when they are directed personally, abusive, or obscene, and when the time limit has been exceeded. An individual who is causing disruption may be required to leave the meeting. The purpose of public participation is to allow the board to hear feedback from community members. It is not designed for debate or discussion with the board. And we did receive a couple of written public comments prior to the meeting, and they are attached to the agenda. So at this time, anyone wishing to make a public comment can come up to the lectern.
My name is Nicole Sherman from Schwenksville Borough. In talking about COVID statistics, we're constantly discussing percentages. When you look at the data, however, those numbers generally have an asterisk next to them, indicating that they are for healthy individuals with no pre-existing medical conditions. I'm here to talk to you tonight about the students in the district population that don't qualify under that data. I have 2 children, a son and a daughter, both of whom are elementary students. The first time my son was admitted to CHOP, he was 8 days old. I vividly remember being a first-time mom, sitting in a hospital room, signing consent for surgery for my baby, when I myself had only ever been admitted to a hospital once in my life, the week prior for his delivery. That night, my husband and I met with multiple teams of doctors going over risks, waivers, and timeline for his first surgery the following day. Of course, we were distraught, overwhelmed, and shaken with a guttural sense of complete helplessness. Years later, my daughter was born, and she too began struggling with her own medical issues. Year after year, we have watched regular viruses repeatedly turn into pneumonia, and how that turns into round-the-clock inhaled corticosteroids, oral steroids, bronchodilators, oxygen saturation checks, antibiotics, and more emergency room runs than I can even remember. In the years since that first admission, I can no longer count the number of times I've lived in our home away from home at CHOP. I've lost count of how many times my kids have had to be in the operating room, but I can tell you that it's often enough that I know several of the PACU nurses by name and vice versa. What I can tell you is that my son received an entire year of homebound education for first grade. In the 2019-2020 school year, he was hospitalized yet again for an infection he acquired at school. Last year, my daughter had 28 school absences, every single one of them medically excused. 4 of those weeks of absences, we were hospitalized in CHOP. During her last hospitalization, she needed surgery, and when we were finally discharged, we were home less than 6 hours before I had to call 911 for emergency transport back. I tell you all of this not for your pity, but because I feel as though it's important for everyone to hear and understand that not every student in the district falls into the asterisk category of healthy without pre-existing conditions. However, there's more to my story. In the case of both my children, they're both special ed students. They have IEPs, receive therapies, require SDIs, and need individualized supports throughout the school day. Prior to the 2020 shutdown, my daughter was only able to spend a portion of the school day in a regular ed classroom, and only with a one-on-one paraprofessional. During last year's virtual voyage, she required learning assistance and support daily, including supports from her special education team throughout the course of the day. I tell you all of this tonight to give you an example of the students in the school population who don't fit neatly into one box or another. However, I also think that in sharing our story, you can easily see why neither in-person nor the PV Virtual Academy is an appropriate fit for my students at this moment in time. While they may not be the majority, I wholeheartedly believe that every student in Perkiomen Valley deserves an equitable education across any and all platforms. I urge you to please consider weighing less on the metrics of who is attending and more on the value and equity of the education students are receiving across the board. I'll end with this. I've been told repeatedly in my advocacy for my children that the only thing any student in this country is entitled to is a fair and appropriate public education. I think we can all agree that asynchronous education in a virtual setting, even for a portion of the school day for elementary students during a global pandemic, is neither fair nor appropriate.
Need you to wrap up your comments, please.
Thank you for your time and consideration.
Thank you.
Hi, my name is Tracy Tweedy. I live in Collegeville Borough, and I have 2 children in Middle School East. One of those children is too young to be vaccinated yet. She and others like her are the reason I'm here today, asking you as a board to use your hearts, use your good judgment, and follow the science to make the right decision to vote for the health and safety plan that requires masks to protect our youngest learners. I know you're in a difficult position that's made harder by the loud and threatening voices, but don't let those voices cloud your judgment. If you make the decision to protect our students, you might continue to be threatened and harassed, and I'm sorry for that. But if you make the wrong decision, children could end up sick and hospitalized. The rate of children being hospitalized for COVID is rising every day in other parts of our country, and it's just a matter of time before that's us. I know this is a one-way platform, but I wish I understood why it's okay to have a policy that means my daughter would be sent home for wearing spaghetti straps, but you can't send someone home for not wearing a mask. For her, you're not supposed to distract the boys. For them, they might send her to the hospital. I know I'm being dramatic for effect, but it's not that much of a stretch right now. At the very least, please require masks until every single child in our district has the opportunity to be vaccinated. Every single child deserves to be safe in school. I speak for so many parents who are uncomfortable speaking up. They're uncomfortable being in this room today. But some of them are sitting here with masks on, silently making their statement. We urge you to please do the right thing and protect our children.
My name is Alicia Taylor, Perkiomen Township. I'm here representing many parents in this district. I am a nurse. I have a degree in science. Science is always changing and questioned. I'm taught to use evidence-based practice, which is where I utilize the most current research available in order to improve health and safety. The letters after my name mean nothing because first and foremost, I am a mother and a wife. I have 3 children in this district, 1 already graduated, 2 may not be attending in the fall. I still can't believe I'm up here explaining how covering our breathing apparatus is detrimental to our health. Without adequate oxygen exchange, you cannot have proper cognitive function. Basically, if you can't breathe, you cannot think. The CDC recently reported that 70% of the people that contracted COVID strictly adhered to the mask mandate, yet they still got sick. Why is that? I work in our community and never stopped working. My daughter held 3 jobs while teachers claimed they were too afraid to get back to work. Where's the data from the school that was submitted to assist the CDC? How many kids tested positive? How many were sick? How many were, and what were their symptoms? How many were hospitalized and why? Most importantly, how many recovered? How many kids were contact traced, forced to quarantine, and still had a negative test? Why hasn't this been reported to parents yet? Social distancing is not based on science. We are surrounded by viruses as we speak. We are made up of viruses. We cannot escape them. Your weapon of choice is a cloth to cover our faces. Not only is this primitive and ignorant, but it's also no evidence that they work. None. Cloth masks do not work. However, there is substantial evidence that the masks are detrimental to our health. You continue to make decisions based on what ifs and not facts and data. I have a message to the parents. This stops when we say it stops. Their vote means nothing. I make the health decisions for my family, not the school board, not the CDC, not the health department, not the government. Me and my husband. We need to do what's right for our family. If everyone put their families first, this would end very quickly because we would realize that we cannot comply with these proposals and raise normal, healthy adults. We have the power. I gave my boys an exemption on June 1st. Many parents said there's only 3 weeks left of school, why bother? It's 514 days too many. Here's what my boys experienced. Fellow students asked how they got away with not wearing a mask. They explained they had exemptions. Your children do not want to wear masks. They do not need to wear masks. One of my son's friends had a different experience when his mask was pulled down. A teacher came up to him and said, "Pull your mask up. My mother with cancer would appreciate it." Why in the world is it a child's responsibility for her mother's health? Guilt, shaming, bullying tactics are being allowed by teachers now. Guess what, parents? You do not need paperwork. Send your children to school without a mask like the rest of the country has been doing. They are not ruled by money-hungry politicians and teachers' unions. Humans like to belong. It's in our nature. But what are our sacrifices and compromises are we making just to belong? These people do not care about our children. Once we realize this, that they only care about the $12,000 that comes with their enrollment, then maybe we'll wake up. If we
Wrap
don't
up your
stand up for our
comments.
children, we don't stand up for much.
My name is Mary Henderson, and I live in Skippack Township. I have 2 PV kids, one in 4th in Skippack and one in 6th grade at Middle School West. I also work in an autistic classroom in a neighboring school district. As a mom of a child with a mental health issue and an autoimmune disorder, I feel strongly about wearing masks in school. You see, if my daughter gets COVID, it sends her into a spiral downward where she will land back in a behavioral hospital, the very one that we have been trying so hard to keep her out of. My older daughter has asthma and struggles to breathe when she gets a cold. People with moderate to severe or uncontrolled asthma are more likely to be hospitalized from COVID-19 than people without. As with adults, pre-existing medical conditions have been suggested as a risk factor for severe disease and intense care admission in children. In addition, I need to remind the board the special needs children do attend Perkiomen Valley schools. Children who may not be able to wear a mask because of their medical necessities. I've been reminded in the past year with my own child that it truly does take a village. Please be a part of this special needs child's village to keep them safe. Students do benefit from in-person learning, and safely returning to an in-person instruction in the fall 2021 is a priority. My kids, like any others, deserve to be in school safely. Due to the circulating and highly contagious Delta variant, CDC recommends universal indoor masking by all students, staff, teachers, and visitors in K-12 schools. As someone who has recently lost a family member to COVID complications, I urge the board to vote for the mask mandate. Additionally, I urge you to not think about this 4x4 piece of fabric politically. This is no more political than the floor I am standing on. Please vote with the health and safety of our children in mind. Thank you.
Hi, Rachel Donovan, Skipback Township. I was pleasantly surprised that Governor Wolf said he will not be mandating masks for Pennsylvania schools. However, he said that the schools will need to figure it out themselves, and that I could not disagree with more. The decision as to whether my 6-year-old son will be wearing a mask should only be decided by myself and my husband. This is a very personal and private matter, one that a school board should not be deciding on my behalf. Beyond the obvious psychological effects of a child wearing a mask and seeing their peers in a mask, it is not sanitary. I have witnessed my son and other kids drop their mask on the ground and then put it right back on their face. Kids are constantly touching their mask and getting all types of germs all over it, which defeats the purpose of wearing one. Masks are a breeding ground for bacteria that is touching our children's face and mouth all day. Additionally, I believe masks are obstructing our natural breathing path, and I myself have had a difficult time breathing normally while wearing a mask, even for a short period of time. With all of that said, if another parent wants their child to wear a mask, I respect their decision. I may not agree with it, but as a parent, they should be able to make that decision. The same choice and respect needs to be given to the parents that do not want their child's face covered. I do not like confrontation nor public speaking, so this is very hard for me to do. But I cannot and will not sit silently and have my son be forced to cover his face. Let's do the right thing and put this very personal decision where it belongs, in the hands of parents or legal guardians. Thank you.
My name is Holly Lehman, and I'm in Lower Frederick Township. Thank you for taking the time to listen to us. My husband and I have an elementary school student and have serious concerns as we enter the school year. New Jersey, Philadelphia, Methacton, and Norristown districts have implemented mask mandates, and I expect many more surrounding districts to follow suit in the weeks to come. Montgomery County has released guidance in support of mask mandates. I am not only here representing my own family, but 30 other families that were not able to attend and ask that I speak on their behalf. 3 of the families could not attend due to COVID exposure. Those cases were at camps in which masking was not mandatory, and the extent of the outbreak has yet to be seen. From my own personal experience, my 10-year-old nephew contracted COVID in December of 2020 and had a mild cold, but has ongoing asthma. The parents I am representing share my concerns surrounding our children's physical and mental health, social interaction, and a direct line to a teacher. Many whom utilized last year's synchronous virtual option are opting to send their children in person. Even though we are heavily focused on mandatory masking, I would also ask the board to make a solid social distancing and safety measures plan. The opposition will say their rights as a parent are being violated. That could not be further from the truth. The grounds of every public school in America have some universal rules. A citizen's right off school property may be forfeited while they are on public school grounds. In almost every case, it is for the safety of the students and staff while on those grounds. This plea for mandating masks is no different. Mandating masks is not a political stance or a decision to make a group of parents feel empowered. It is a simple measure to keep the students safe. I will conclude my plea for common sense with this. When we were introduced to Schwenksville Elementary, we were told that each student is to embody a positive mantra called the Fab Five. Be safe, be responsible, be positive, be respectful, be involved. The first of the five, be safe. Safety is always at the forefront of what every parent wants for their child while in someone else's care. There is no argument that can be made for not having a mask mandate. The only decision is a mask mandate. Your duty as the board starts and ends with keeping the students' safety in the forefront of every decision. Vote to mandate masks. Thank you.
Danielle Dury, Perkiomen Township. So I was going to read the petition that we submitted to you guys earlier today. Instead, I'm going to read the 230 names that signed the petition, who are members of our community and our school district, who are against masking the kids for the coming school year and who would like to see mask choice. Gregory Chippy, Pam Herman, John Kirk, Rebecca Nemec, Joseph Nemec, Alyssa Hoffman, Philip Doherty, Shelley Burke, Stephen Winaski, Robert Hanshaw, Tara Winaski, Matt Stefaroni, Kim Spina, Gretchen Miller, Noni Lear, Debbie Leonetti, Dennis Dominguez, Elisa Dominguez, Amanda Zekas, Robert Tyson, Heather Coyne, Teresa Miller, Brian Dancer, Steve Buxton, Jim Root, Jenna Bale, Lou Andaracchio, Monica Murphy, Luke DiStefano, Alina D. Domenico, Dominic, Elizabeth B. Seeker, Stephen Gay, Dennis Preston, William Hopkins, Nicole Andriaco, David Rote, Brooke Gallus, Colleen Skellinger, Brooke McDonald, Leanne Smith, Beth Mattia, Jill Schaefer, Libby Arthur, Holly Young, Stephanie Honick, Eric Honick, Matthew Barber, Brittany Barber, Eric Nesbitt, Chris Cairns, Ann Masson, Christina Russell, Shannon Morris, Lauren McCullough, Cheryl Brazillo, Maggie Adams, Kristen Geddes, Gretchen Miller, Elizabeth D'Archangel, Miranda Buxton, Carol Roop, Stacy Payne, Kathy Weiss, Amanda Carmody, Keely Manning, Courtney Rodriguez, Melissa Taylor, Jess Ott, Dana Teddy, Christian Reeder, Leah Reeder, Arena Poley, Kimberly Hay Walsh, Melissa Dawson, Allison Saylor, Keka Ward, Geraldine Romano, Beverly Albright, Kelsey Nestor, Wendy Rowley, Jane Rote, Tara Hanlon, Michelle Bruno, Roberta Rishi, Cindy Hickey. My time's up. These are the people in our community. The list goes on and on. I emailed it to you. It has their addresses and where they live. Thank you.
Good evening. My name is Jim Bruni. I'm a resident of Perkiomen Township. My 3 children graduated from PV, and I'd like to make 3 quick points, if I could. That was just to stop to make sure everyone's looking at me, because I think these points are important. I was present at last week's meeting as an observer. Of course, I don't have no children in school right now, so a lot of people ask, why am I even here? I saw many passionate and brave people come before you. They shared their concerns over masks, CRT, gender confusion, etc. Some of you listened. Some of you took notes. Unfortunately, some of you, didn't look up from your computers. But my rhetorical question to you right now is, why is there no follow-up to any of your constituents' concerns on this agenda? I looked at the agenda. There's no follow-up on anything that they said. Now, I realize that may be the rules of the committee, but I do find it shocking that there isn't any follow-up on these very, very important positions that people taken. To me, no follow-up means, well, your concerns are heard, but they're not important, and we're going to make our own decisions. I may be wrong, I may be right, but as an observer, I don't think it takes much to follow up, and what you'll do, you'll build trust with these people. Even if you don't have the answers that they want, it shows that you're listening and you're doing the job that they elected you to do, is listen to them, because I see a lot of concern out here. Point number 2, and I have another rhetorical question. Why did each of you campaign to be a member of this PV school board? I had a few educated guesses that I wrote down here. Many of you might be seeking a higher position within the PV school district. Some may think it's important. You want to make important decisions for your district. Maybe your kids are involved. I'm not sure if you get paid. Maybe that's a situation. But the one that I hope is happening is that you want to make a difference at PV. And here's how you can make that difference. Listen and follow up with the people who elected you. They will understand if you can't always solve their problem, but if you show them you are trying, your relationship and your trust will grow with them, and you will accomplish one of your top reasons and responsibilities as a school board. And I'll kind of read that right here is you oversee the activities of the school system so students can have the best possible experience and outcome. I know I'm running out of time, but I know at last week's meeting, there was the mask situation. You said you were going to follow the CDC and the Montgomery County Board of Health. Well, they are strongly recommending the masks. I think these people out here are strongly recommending that their kids don't wear masks. You have a tough decision ahead of you, but I would hope that you give as much credence to the CDC and Montgomery County Board of Health that you will give to these folks that are wanting this. Thank you.
Ashley Brees, Skip-Pack. I'm going to pivot a little bit in topic here. I've been in this district for 2 years. The very first big debate that I participated in was the mental health Save the Spanish class debacle. I'm curious to know how many of you voted to save the Spanish class and then put our children in a mental health crisis. Because that's what we're dealing with. The children you send home from school are very different from the child you see walk in the morning. As parents, we see our children come home anxious, sad, confused, tired, annoyed, frustrated, and in some cases, depressed. When these symptoms become consistent, they are given a diagnosis. I am a mother who suffers with anxiety, with a son who suffers with anxiety, and a daughter with ADHD. Do you know what it's like to have to spend an entire month mentally preparing them for a possible mask mandate? Mental health is a silent killer in children. How many of our children are you willing to risk to that disease? 2% of people with anxiety died during an average follow-up of 9.7 years. That puts some of our children fresh out of high school. Being diagnosed with anxiety or depression significantly increases a person's mortality risk. Anxiety and depression account for 50% of mental health disorders worldwide. 10% of children with IEPs are diagnosed with anxiety or depression. Do you know the leading cause of adolescent drug addiction is mental health? They even screen for symptoms with parent questionnaires when you go to the pediatrician's office now. A child who suffers from anxiety is more likely to be addicted to alcohol, and a child who suffers with depression is more likely to get addicted to opioids. Do you know the most common mental health diagnosis among children since COVID is anxiety and depression? When are you going to wake up? The brain responds to addiction through immediate self-gratification. It's a positive feeling that connects a negative feeling, to a substance. Do you know that 9.5% of children in Monco have been linked to substance abuse? I can tell you from personal experience, my brother was 8 years old. He's now 33, addicted to heroin and fentanyl, and has overdosed 13 times. 11-year-olds account for 10% of addiction cases. That's the start of elementary school. What are you doing for that? Adolescents are the most vulnerable age group to suffer with addiction. The reason is because their brains have not fully developed a section that controls impulse and motivation. There's a reason I asked you how many of our children are diagnosed with IEPs, and I'm almost finished. I'm aware of my time. It is a direct connection to the mental health crisis and opioid crisis we are going to deal with if you continue with these mask mandates. 9.4% of children who have been diagnosed with a mental health disorder. Most ADHD children have impulse issues. That's a direct red flag and cause for concern, making my child a perfect candidate for substance abuse. 1 in 6 children are diagnosed with a mental health disorder. 1 in 17 children will be diagnosed with COVID.
I need you to wrap up your comments, please.
I'm sorry?
I need you to wrap up your comments, please. Your 3 minutes is up.
I'm almost done. 1 in 25 adolescents are addicted to drugs. Mental health directly links to substance abuse, and mask mandates are directly linked to mental health disorders in children. Who are you protecting? Because you are not protecting them when these cases start falling into place in PV, we are all going to look at you. Right now, it's more likely a child becomes addicted rather than catch COVID. My time is up.
Hi, my name is Kelly Sirianni, and I'm from Collegeville Borough. I would like to piggyback off of what this parent said back here. I understand anxiety disorders. I myself have one. My 6-year-old also does. He was not in school for kindergarten last year because I did not feel comfortable sending him there safely. I also have a brother who was addicted to heroin and died of a heroin overdose. And I know what it's like for a parent to lose a child. I am not prepared to lose mine because my child deserves to go to school in a safe place. Does anyone here know what it's really like to not be able to breathe? I hear a lot of people saying they can't breathe with a mask on. I have asthma. I've had pneumonia every year of my life. My children do. I've had my children and myself put on oxygen. I have had them at CHOP several times. They're immunocompromised, and the past 18 months are the only time that I have not seen them sick because they have not been in school and they have been wearing masks. I haven't had to use their inhalers or put them on their nebulizer. I just don't understand how I can even feel comfortable sending my child to first grade this year. He has anxiety. He needs to be in school. He thrives in school. He came for an orientation at South the other day and was just so excited because he wants to be in that environment. I just don't understand how he can be there with a mask on and have other children around him whose parents do not believe maybe in the virus or that it affects people. I am not willing to send my child to school, and I'm really having a tough time. I had this whole thing that I wrote. So I just think that everybody has a right to go to school and be safe. We have physical health and mental health at play here, and his mental health was definitely affected by not being able to go to kindergarten last year. We know it's taken a toll on all of our children. I just feel that we've worked really hard. Some of us have worked really hard over the past 18 months, and it would be absolutely negligent on the school's part not to be able to protect all of our children. If we have to do it, put them in separate classes. Put my kid in class with all the kids that are masked, and then take the masked kids or the unmasked kids in another class. Be fine with that. It's segregation. Okay. No comments. No comments, right? And we know that my mask protects you and your mask protects me. And I don't want to have my child like a part of this big experiment. I'm not going to play Russian roulette with his life because everybody's afraid of this is infringing on their freedoms.
Hello, Stephanie Anzis, Perkiomen Township. They told us it's just 2 weeks. It's just a mask. They told us it's just 2 weeks. It's just a mask. It's just a temp check, a desk shield, lunch 6 feet apart from a friend. It's just the same pot of kids on the playground. It's just anxiety about not only contracting the virus, but spreading it to a classmate or getting in trouble because you took a mask break. It's just your first school experience. It's just a masked 5-year-old learning to write and read and sound out words without relying on the physical cues or emotions on friends' faces. But don't worry, they're smiling behind that piece of fabric. It's just 7 hours of inhaling remnants of this morning's snack, this afternoon's lunch, your own bodily fluids, snot, and other pathogens. It's for the greater good. It's just 2 weeks. It's just a mask. We continue to say that kids are resilient, that this will be a blip on the radar, and as long as we cultivate a loving, safe, secure home and do our part, they'll understand, they'll be fine, which I wholeheartedly agreed with to an extent, except we're well beyond that point. We're 18 months into this. Kids are not resilient, they are vulnerable. They are the easiest to overlook. They are expected to comply and have no voice, and their mental health is the easiest to ignore. It's up to us as parents to take a stand on their behalf, because if the last year and a half has shown us anything, it's become crystal clear that we cannot depend on anyone else, not the government, a teachers union, an administration, or a school board, to keep the best interests of all children top of mind. What these children are enduring is wrong, and we are responsible if we allow it to continue. I'm here tonight to express my support of parent choice. Every individual's right to weigh the risk-benefit and make the best decision for their children, especially when it comes to masking and medical testing. I also support and respect those who are most comfortable wearing a mask and that they should continue to do so. I would not judge, mock, or suggest otherwise for them, as that is their right. I'm simply advocating for the same respect and choice to also remain true for those like myself who support keeping masks optional. At this point, the damage of masking our children far outweighs the risks and impacts of this virus. Where is the data and long-term studies that show it is effective, safe, and not detrimental to their physical, social, emotional, and psychological development or well-being? I would love for a trusted medical expert to explain to me how my children have been able to attend summer camp for 7 hours a day alongside 150 other children aged 5 to 12 without masks or mitigation measures, playing gaga ball and other close contact games they love, and attending multiple field trips a week to both indoor and outdoor venues, Urban Air, Chuck E. Cheese, Crayola Factory, local pools, Dutch Wonderland, etc. There hasn't been a single case of COVID. And thank God for that. Yet we are expected to accept and explain to our children that come the first day of school in a couple of weeks, suddenly, while seated at desks at least a foot apart for 80% of the day, the risk magically increases, and masks are necessary for the sake of everyone's health and safety. Please, someone make it make sense. But in the meantime, I ask that you please do not take that choice away from parents to decide what is best for their family and their children, once again, for the school year. Thanks for your time.
Hello again. Lisa McHale, Perk Township. As a resident and taxpayer, I'm speaking out again tonight in support of parent choice. I've heard a ton of people talk about their beliefs, what they would choose to do if they were their children. I believe it is parent choice that we should be all standing for. I will continue to stand by the comments I made at last week's meeting on August 2nd regarding parent choice. I stand shoulder to shoulder with those parents who seek to have full authority over their children's best interests. Next, I have reason to believe that there may be a few select people connected to this school board, along with members of this community, that are in fact defaming me to my employer for views I have expressed at these meetings. This is very concerning, as this type of harassment is affecting my livelihood, my children, and my family's well-being. They are maliciously trying to silence me for my sound beliefs and my right to free speech. Defamation is an illegal offense. It is pure evil, and it is a form of bullying. This bullying by adult members of our community needs to stop, and it needs to stop now. What example might this be setting for our children and our students? This type of bullying will not be tolerated. Let it be known, and let me be crystal clear. I have spoken with legal counsel. If this is not put to an immediate end, further action will be taken. In closing, I would like to respectfully ask everybody here to understand that I have the best interest of the children and their families at heart. I'd ask you that you understand that my feelings on this subject do not affect my career or work life. I would ask you not to interfere with either of those things. We can have an intelligent debate without slandering each other at our places of employment. I happen to take issue with these particular things that are happening in our schools. It doesn't change the person I am, it doesn't change how I interact with people, and it certainly doesn't change how I do my job. Once again, I and my tax dollars stand with parent choice. Thank you.
Phil Owens, Perkins Township. I didn't prepare anything tonight. A lot of these parents did, and I applaud you for that. I've just been listening to everybody else's views. I stand by my shirt. No Republicans, no Democrats. I love dogs. So I'm here tonight to ask, I know I can't ask questions of you, but parents in the audience, raise your hand if you want what's absolutely best for your children.
Mr. Owens, you need to direct your comments to us and not to the audience when you're speaking.
Sorry,
in public.
audience. I'm sorry for asking that. All of us want the same thing. We want what's for our children. I'm not going to sit here and tell Matt what he should do for his kids, nor would he tell me what I should do for my children. This issue we've been going through for the past 18 plus months now has divided our country. It is divided right along these lines, so Republican and Democrat. We, as a community, need to reunite as a community and say, you know what, we're all going to do what is absolutely best for the kids. Okay, again, I know what's best for my daughters. Like some of the other individuals have shared, they have physical things going on with their children. I absolutely empathize with those individuals, okay? I 100% do. There's also mental things that go on with individuals via anxiety and things like that. I'm 47 years old. I've never had an issue with flying in my entire life. For my job, I had traveled extensively throughout COVID. And I will tell you, I came to an almost breakdown having to get on a plane and sit for 3 hours with a mask on my face. And we have children, we're telling them, I want you to sit in school and focus on learning, but wear a mask for 6, 7 hours. We don't know, and neither you nor the parents who aren't of those children know how it affects them. It affects their mental health, and I heard someone earlier, and I forget where she is, mention depression and things like that. So we have physical issues going on with some individuals, we have mental issues going with others. Let the parents make their choice. Okay, do not say to us, you're going to tell me what's best for my kids or these individuals' parents or children. Again, I don't care if you're Republican, Democrat, whatever. You want best. What you want was best for your children. So do I. I want what's best for mine and for yours as well. I respect your opinion. I like to hear it. That's why I came tonight. I didn't prepare anything. I'm literally going off the cuff because I wanted to hear other people's point of view, and I respect those points of view. I just ask that you respect that as well and let me make the choice for my 2 kids. That's all.
name is Jason Eric Saylor. I'm in Skippack Township. I wanted to talk briefly about some of the comments that have come out today and also to talk in favor of support of a mask choice. It's really important that I think everyone understands that this is a hard decision for the board to make, and the board takes in the discussions from the audience and from the members who have submitted emails. Some board members might show they take it in more than the others, but we can all be assured that they're trying to do the best they can. What I find is important is that there are too many people that like to pigeonhole data to their perspective. And as someone who's a data nerd, as someone who works in research, I just like to look at data and say, this is what the data shows. There was a comment made about Dr. Lorraine's speech, and I think that got abstracted outside on Facebook. And by the way, a lot of people like to do things on Facebook and social media that they would never do in live person. I find that to be something that's negative to do. Dr. Lorraine clearly stated that if you took an abstract test study and you had one vaccinated person, let's call that person a teacher, and you put them in a room with, let's say, 50 unvaccinated people, for giggles, let's call them the student. So one vaccinated teacher and 50 unvaccinated subjects or students, the chances of a teacher and or student getting secondarily sick and getting hospitalized is 0.0000625%. Secondarily, the mass study, as Dr. Lorraine states, are from mass efficacy of 0% to a high point at 15%. The high point data was based off of New Zealand, Australia, and Canada. There is no high point data over 7.5% in the United States. The abstract studies they talked about are self-reported. The problem with self-reporting, specifically based on web-based apparatuses, as someone who deals with web-based panel online surveys, is people lie. The only type of clinical science study that you would get is actually being in person, not self-report. That's the problem. COVID is not going away. Whether it's alpha, beta, gamma, delta, or lambda, or omicron, or epsilon, or xi, and psi, and phi, which are the new sigma and all the other names that will be coming over the next 2 to 5 years, that's what we're going to have. We're going to have more and more variants. Over the past 19 months, more children have been hospitalized because of pneumonia than have been hospitalized due to COVID. Thankfully, in Pennsylvania, we're at 73% vaccinated at 18 plus, and that is great. The original argument was that we're concerned for those who are unvaccinated, but the response to that is not to say, hey, high school, we're not going to mask the high school students because they have an opportunity to be vaccinated and the teachers are vaccinated. 7th and 8th grade won't be vaccinated, but we'll mask the kids in elementary school when they're walking around the hallways, when they go to the bathroom, when they're in the lunchroom, but when they sit down, they'll take off their mask. The teacher can't be masked. The teacher should wear a face shield because the student needs to see the tongue, especially in 1st, 2nd, and 3rd grade. The student needs to see the tongue of the teacher so they can learn facial expressions and cognitive dissonance to learn how to talk. That would be a proper argument to have. One size fits all doesn't work, which means we need parent choice because we need to choose the fact that our kids need to be educated properly and safely. Thank you.
Good evening. My name is Bill McGill. I am a resident of Perkiomen Township. I am a 3rd grade teacher at Evergreen Elementary, and I also am the elected president of the Perkiomen Valley Teachers Union Association. I want to make 3 points this evening. First, the Perkiomen Valley teachers are very excited to get back to in-person teaching on the 30th of August. Second, we are very anxiously awaiting the administration and our volunteer school board for policy on how we're going to operate our classrooms this year and how we have to set them up for social distancing, distance between desks, etc. I say that because teachers are going to want to get into their classrooms to start setting them up very soon. Third, I've been listening to the school board meetings at home mostly over the past couple months, and I've been hearing a lot of chatter about CRT or critical race theory. And I would like to say it is not present in Perkiomen Valley. We do not teach it. It is not taught here. Let's stop the rhetoric about it. That's it. Thank you.
Hello, my name is Julie Dickey, Skippack Township. I have 3 children in the district, 1 elementary, 1 middle, and 1 high school. And I would like to voice my extreme opposition to any mask mandate. Now that there is no state of emergency, no high level of positivity, and no state or federal mandate, I would like to know the legal, constitutional, or statutory procedure or precedents for such an action. If there is no legal basis for such a mandate, I have no intention of complying. The board has a responsibility to taxpayers, parents, and students to prove there is a legal standing for such an action. Without such, you are opening up the district to expensive lawsuits and litigation. Parents will not stand idly by while you force our children to wear a non-approved medical device. We are not asking you to force all children to be unmasked, only to allow the parents who know what's best for their children to make that decision on a family-by-family basis. Why are the majority of districts, not only surrounding PV, but in all of Pennsylvania, remaining mask optional? The majority of these districts are larger than ours. If you believe my mask protects others, why don't you believe that their mask will afford them the same protection? I'm not trying to force others to do what I think is best. I simply want the right to do what I believe is best for my children. I think it's interesting that we started this meeting with the Pledge of Allegiance. The last line states, "with liberty and justice for all." And yet by instituting a mask mandate, you are attempting to strip us as parents of our liberty to protect and nurture our children as we see fit.
Dawn D. Fury, Trap Borough. As stated in the beginning of this meeting, part of the Perkiomen Valley mission statement is to empower our children socially and emotionally. However, today, online, there were changes made to the health and safety plan requiring our children to wear a mask and cover their mouths, restrict their breathing. Do we feel that requiring every child to wear a mask is good for their emotional and social well-being? Have you asked all children and parents? I haven't received that survey, nor have my children. Last week, the board stated several times that masks would be recommended, not required. Dr. Russell and I spoke on Tuesday, the day after the meeting, and you mentioned to me that there was no data at that time requiring masks for our children. What has changed in a week? Let's not also forget the meeting we had at Perkiomen Valley Middle School East, where parents were told that our schools and districts did not have to follow the CDC guidelines for our health and safety plan. Children are not any more at risk from COVID than they are from the seasonal flu. Masks recommended would give every parent and child the right to wear a mask if they so choose and believe in them and believe that they work. Also, when Dr. Russell and I spoke, she asked me where I received the data that the mortality rate from COVID in children was 0. I sent her an article from the CDC and the American Academy of Pediatrics. During our conversation, she also mentioned to me, and forgive me if this is misquoted a bit, that she also heard that children are at greater risk from drowning than they are dying from COVID. So my question today then is, are we requiring masks? If we are requiring masks because we think there is such a danger of our children from COVID, then are we also closing the pool in our district and not allowing our children to swim? Show us the data that shows that masks aren't harmful to our children that we've been asking for all year long and never received. I will never understand why you need a parent's permission to give our children Tylenol, but you think that you have the right to require them all to wear a medical device that restricts their breathing. Supporting parent choice means allowing each parent to choose what is best for their child. I do not believe the school board has the right to mandate or restrict our children's breathing. This was even in question at the Senate Education Committee hearing on August 6th as to whether or not it's legal for the school board to make such an order when there's not an emergency order in place. Maybe that's something our districts should look into before voting tonight on the health and safety plan. Please don't make our children wear your fear on their faces for one more day. Any parent who believes that masks work can by all means allow their child to wear a mask and feel comfortable. However, as parents, we all deserve a choice, and our children deserve a choice, especially those students having adverse effects coming home every day with such things as headaches. I've heard many stories of this happening. I have yet to hear an agenda on one of our board meetings talking about how our children are being affected by these masks in a negative way. If you are concerned about our children, please vote mask recommended and not optional so our children and parents have a choice. They deserve nothing less.
I'm Katie Ott in the Perkiomen Township. I'm a student at Perkiomen Valley High School, and I believe the choice of mask wearing should be up to the parents and kids in the school district. I speak for myself and my fellow classmates when I say these masks are jeopardizing all of our futures. Many students have told me specific workplaces enforce the wearing of a piece of fabric on their face. This does not sit right with me as a kid who is lucky to have a family business outside in the sun with no such nonsense. To add on, people tend to bring in problems with being able to breathe on a regular basis, and I do not understand how wearing a mask over where you breathe is supposed to help that. One issue going to school is with kids identifying as random objects or animals, as I feel as I am able to identify as wearing a mask. How can you allow one and not the other? For my last words, I would like to say many of my fellow classmates that cannot be here tonight strongly agree with me and become distracted from these fabrics strapped across our faces that are intended to help us, but really just make sitting in a classroom very stressful. Thank you.
Rick Sames, Perkiomen Township. As many of you, I'm here to talk about the health and safety plan and the amount of faith blindly placed in our government and why it concerns me. In history, doctors across America at one point were endorsing cigarettes. It was not until 1964 that enough research came out to say that cigarettes were in fact killing us. It was not until 1989 that the U.S. decided to consistently stop using asbestos in construction materials despite years of private research telling us it was dangerous. And yet it is the U.S. government who we go to decide what is best for our lives and for our children. The same U.S. government that continues to send our young men and women to fight unwinnable wars, that let Vietnam veterans be exposed to Agent Orange, let Iraq veterans be exposed to radiation poisoning, and over a decade later, I still have surgeries from injuries sustained overseas with no help from the government. And yet this is the same government that we are supposed to trust for what is best for our next generation. We are all here because we care for our children. As parents, we do what is best for our children, physically and mentally. I make decisions for my family on what is best for my family, not every family. It is important, it is impossible for one person to know what is best for every child. I am a pro-choice citizen. I feel every citizen should have the opportunity to choose what they feel is best for their child. If a child is better suited to wear a mask, then they should. If it is better for a child not to wear a mask, then they should not have to. My children are being raised to treat everyone as equal, regardless if they wear a mask or not. Again, it is impossible for any individual to know what is best for every child. That is why we rely on each and every parent to make the decision for their own child. We need to be free in order to decide what is best for our children, and our children should be free to decide what is best for them. Children need to be free in order to learn.
Good evening, Jason Geddes, Skippack Township. Parent to 3 kids, 2 middle schoolers, 1 elementary. Wasn't planning on speaking, but it's, I do feel strongly about it. I agree wholeheartedly with parent choice. Speaking as a father of these kids that have come to me and have said, you know, why did I get vaccinated? You know, everybody in my household who was able to get vaccinated got vaccinated. I work frontline healthcare. I'm not a frontline worker, but I work in healthcare, senior living, and we wore these masks. We continue to wear these masks, and we continue to get positive cases. We are in an environment where we are the most masked, and we continue to get cases. You know, we went maskless when almost 100% of our residents got vaccinated. And I can tell you, they're happy and healthy. And that's why I agree with what Mr. Saylor said. In that high school and middle school setting where the kids are available and able to get vaccinated, I personally recommend it. You know, as somebody who got vaccinated, because I care about the people who are the most vulnerable among us. You know, I would hate to see our kids step up to the plate and then just get told no. You know, I want to see us get back to normal. And the kids have been the least at risk and the most impacted. I had one of my sons complaining and struggling emotionally, and he wants to see an end. And you can help him see that. So I'm asking you personally to think long and hard and give the parents a choice. Let them make their health decisions for their children. Thank you very much.
Hi, my name is Elizabeth Weaver. I'm from Skipback Township. I'm an 11th grade student here at PV. And regarding COVID-19 and mandating masks for this upcoming school year, we have all been affected by COVID-19, some more than others, clearly shown by everyone who's spoken before me. But to all the parents who are sharing how their kids and my friends are attending summer camps and living life normal, I hope that you're mature enough to recognize that you're taking the selfish choice by not wearing a mask, while you are all aware that there are so many children who don't have the opportunity to be vaccinated. Until we're all able to fully be vaccinated is when I think the choice should be put to the parents to be able to wear masks for their children. But until then, I think it's truly sad that you are willing to put the children in the PV school district at risk and our Viking community at risk when you're giving the choice to the parents. So.
Hi, Marcy Britton, Skipback Township. Let's see. I'm very happy to see the whole school board. I'm new to the area the past 3 years, and I watched a couple online and came to one. I couldn't see anybody. I didn't know who was speaking, so I'm glad to see it in this format, because when it was in the library, I wasn't able to see anyone. And so thank you for being in here so we can see your faces. The one thing I would ask is that when you speak, when you're wearing a mask, I can't tell who's speaking. So if you could raise your hand when you speak, or say your name or something so we know who's speaking, because I couldn't tell in the beginning when you were speaking until I really concentrated to see who was speaking. So that would be very helpful for us that are attending the school board meetings and watching online. If you could state your name or something when you're online, if you have your mask on, we don't, or I guess it'll be on your face on Zoom. But anyway, so thank you for doing it in this format. And I am for parents' choice. I'm a grandmother, and I think every parent should have the right to decide their children's health. And if you feel safe with your child wearing a mask, that's great. If you want to let your child go maskless, that should be up to the parent. And then when you get to the vaccinations, that should also be the parent's choice. That's a medical decision, as well as wearing the mask on your face. That's a medical decision. And if you think the masks work, I don't think they work. So, thank you.
Hi, I'm Pam DeStefano, Perkiomen Township. I wasn't actually going to say anything tonight, but somebody spoke earlier and it just resonated loudly with me. And what she said was, make this make sense. And throughout this entire time, you know, we've been told to follow the science, and I just, realistically, let's look at this room. If your mask protects me and my mask protects you, who's protecting who here? I mean, we have a room with half masked, half unmasked. And the fact of the matter is that regardless of what the vote comes down to, if it's mask optional or if you require masks, there are going to be a good percentage of children in the school who aren't masked. I feel like the goalposts keep getting moved. They keep getting pushed back. First, it was we just want all the teachers to have the opportunity to vaccinate. And then it became, well, we want the opportunity to have the older kids because they're at higher risk to vaccinate. Well, now everybody wants, you know, all the kids vaccinated. And the truth of the matter with that also is all the kids aren't going to get vaccinated, the same that all the kids aren't going to wear masks. You know, we live a life where we take calculated risks, we take mitigated risks daily. You drive a car, you choose to go on a trip and get in an airplane, you go swimming. We've not worn masks prior to this. RSV is a very serious disease within children. Even just the flu. My mom was living with me. She was 88 years old. We tried to be very careful, but nobody wore masks. They're not effective. You're just putting a little piece of cloth over your face. Like I said, who's protecting who here? We have half the people with masks and half without. Johns Hopkins, after studying thousands of children and collecting comprehensive data, they found a mortality rate of 0 among children without pre-existing conditions. And my heart breaks for the kids that have a pre-existing condition. It really does. And I understand the one child is too many, but there have been 358 child deaths from COVID in the entire country. And that's 358 too many, but the truth of the matter is we can't protect these kids from everything. We can't protect everyone from everything. This virus is not going away. And just putting a little cloth piece over your face is just a false sense of security. It's especially given the fact, like I said, that everyone's not masked. If your mask protects you and if your mask protects me and my mask protects you, and there's going to be a large percentage of people not wearing them, who's being protected? I just think we really need to give the choice and let the parents decide what's best for them.
Hi, I'm Cynthia Hills. I am from Lower Frederick Township, and I actually wasn't planning on speaking. But I too work in the senior living industry. For the last 5 years, I've traveled between 22 senior living communities in this area. In March of 2020, out of my 22 senior living communities,
I had 7 that actually had cases of COVID. All the staff wore masks. By October, they were forcing everyone to wear a mask. And some communities had face shields, N95s, and gowns. Every single community got COVID. And it didn't matter what they wore. It didn't matter if they had a face shield and an N95 on, there was still COVID in that community because they forced every single resident to wear the mask. And that was the difference. In the spring, they didn't force them to wear it. In the fall, they did. So every single community ended up with COVID. Or actually, they ended up with a virus. In senior living, we had to get tested based on the county statistics, and it was either once a week, twice a week, or once a month. And if you tested positive, you tested positive for the virus. The PCR test that supposedly tests for the virus cannot distinguish between viruses. And I don't know that everybody knows that. And the new Delta virus, they don't know if it's a Delta virus. They don't know if it's the flu virus. They don't know what virus it is, but it's a virus. And the masks do not work. The particles of respiratory infections are too small, and they will go through anything. I, too, have a daughter who has special needs in this district and has multiple health issues. I do not want her to wear a mask. And in fact, she was the healthiest she was this past year because people who were sick weren't coming into school. We didn't have teachers who had colds that didn't want to take a personal day. We had kids that would come in with colds normally because their parents didn't want to take a day off from work. That wasn't happening. This was the healthiest she ever was. The only time she missed school was when we flew on a plane to Florida and we didn't get sick. And the high school had her, she's in the life skills class, cleaning the doorknobs in the school. I think her immune system was boosted because she was doing that stuff. And I did at the end ask that she not wear a mask because she has a difficult time speaking. And she's very difficult to understand without a mask on. So I don't have a problem with people wearing masks if they truly believe that's going to protect them. But I know being in senior living, it doesn't. So if you want to wear a mask, great, go ahead. But my child, I do not want wearing a mask.
Tim Ott, lifetime member, Perkiomen Township. I've been concerned, just recently I watched your last meeting last week, and I'm concerned there's too much politics getting involved with decisions. I expect you guys to be here for our children's best education. Nothing to do with politics. And I think you ought to understand that the mask situation, you're not going to make everybody happy. It's just not going to happen. So I think the parents are going to have choices. They can let their kids wear the mask between them or not wear the mask, or maybe cyber. I don't know where you are with that. I don't pay enough attention to it. I have a busy occupation. But I think it's very simple, the mask situation. There's so much this way, that way. Nobody knows what's right, whether it protects or don't protect. Personally, I think it needs to be the parent's decision. If you're worried about safety, whether it's children's deaths, I heard someone relate about swimming earlier. I did look up something right before the meeting. I think you're 10 times more likely to die with the swimming than COVID as far as children go. So maybe we should just cement the pool in, put some more classrooms in there, and you can go beyond that. How about 30 times more likely to die from sports? I'm not against sports. I love sports. I have kids in sports. But I want you to use your head about this. 12,000 children a year die from sports injuries. What are we going to do about that? The information I could find on COVID was around under 400. It's kind of odd how you can't find a definite number. I don't know, maybe I'm not that good on the internet. But anyway, I think I saw 330 some deaths from COVID in children. 12,000 every single year from sports. Now, I know you voted $4 million for new fields. I'm not saying let's go out there and bulldoze them, but let's use our heads on this, right? I just want you to use your heads on the mask thing. You're not going to make everybody happy. That's obvious. So I don't want to tell your children what to do. You can have them wear a couple masks, helmets, whatever. I'm not trying to be funny. I'm being serious. My children don't want to wear masks. I don't want them to wear masks. I know a lot of people that don't want them. That affects their learning. They can't. Somebody said they can't see who's speaking. I don't have young children. If I did, it'd be even worse yet. I think the children need to see that the teacher's mouth's moving, they understand speech, help them learn what the whole learning process. That's all I have to say. Just use your heads on your decision.
Hi, my name is Susan Coburn. I live in Perkiomen Township. I think I've only lived here 2 years. I'm a parent of 2 elementary school students at Evergreen, one that's going into 3rd grade and one that's going into 5th grade. As you all know, they cannot be vaccinated yet. One of those has asthma and adrenal insufficiency, for which she's being worked on currently. I have been reassured time and again that the school district would do everything it could to keep her safe. If you do not require masks, that will not happen. This is per her pulmonologist. Universal mask requirements will be essential for both her physical and mental health. Yes, her mental health matters, which is why she needs to be in school. I've already been told by some in the angry crowd that have spoken at previous meetings that her health is unimportant. And there is one here tonight in the audience who has told me point blank that she would rather that my child die than have her child wear a mask. It's not a lie. I would be willing to consider the fully virtual option that you'd offered last year. But the Warren County option that you are considering now is not better than the charter schools that we have looked at, and we will not be utilizing it as my child needs more synchronous education. I'm asking you, please, follow the science. Consider the children, all of the children in your district when you are making this decision about masking. Thank you.
Hi, my name is Shelley, Perkiomen Township, Shelley Burke. I've seen several people trip in here this evening. We might want to do something about that. I mean, everybody. I won't use up all my time. I really don't know what to say except it's an option. This virus isn't going anywhere. It's an option. If you're sick, if you have immune compromise, mask, do virtual. Don't make everybody else suffer. Everybody else doesn't have to suffer. My child, who is going into 4th grade, still has to wear a mask into every store she goes into because it says requires a mask. And why do I put it on her? Because we comply. I don't see an angry audience here tonight, as this woman just said. I see people concerned and wanting rights. And I want to thank the parents that have been busting their asses to fight for our kids' rights. Put politics aside. 18 months in. We're 18 months in. My kid can't go in a grocery store without a mask. I'm holding her hand, and she's going, Mom, 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 Mom. I don't have a mask. And I go, it's okay. It's okay. And she's like, I can't go in there. I don't have a mask. We go back to the car to get her mask. They have not, the little ones still have to wear a mask wherever they go. There's no break for them. My daughter has developed anxiety from this. She has. I'm not saying anything is right or wrong. I'm not saying the people that want to wear a mask, that they're wrong. They're not. This is fear-based, not science. It's not. And I'm tired of my kid living in fear, monitoring the TV. Got to watch what's on TV, what they say. Nickelodeon. My almost fourth grader just had to ask me recently, a Nickelodeon commercial, why is that girl saying she's judged by her skin color? My daughter didn't know what that meant. And it's on Nickelodeon. You guys, look me in the face. This is no joke. This is not a joke. We are playing with our kids' mental wellness here. I'm shaking right now because this is not okay anymore. People can be masked if they want. We know it's not protecting them. We know it's not. The particles are going in here and here. It doesn't do anything. Let our kids breathe when they go to school this year.
We're over an hour into public comment, so I would ask if there's anyone else who wants to speak that you line up so that we can move a little faster.
Alan Schultes, Perkiomen Township. We have a son that's about ready to come in to kindergarten this year. They have zero choice. Vaccines are not available for them to utilize or get access to. And, you know, I think it's very clear, certainly within this room, that you guys have an extremely difficult decision to make, because you're ultimately here to make sure that you have a safe environment for our children, and at the same time want to make sure that you're not invoking anyone's rights or feeling like you're overburdening folks around safety. I think when you look at COVID, you look at the data behind the masks, it's the only option that children who cannot get vaccinated have at this point, albeit a lower percentage than the vaccines that are out there right now from a level of protection. It still provides an important barrier. And that's why a lot of workplaces that are critical for food supply, for supplies that we're looking for when we go shopping on a daily basis so that we can sustain our lives, still have critical COVID policies in place to protect their employees, to protect the food that we eat every single day, and also protect the toiletries that we all found were very dear and important to all of us earlier this year. So I think when you guys are looking at this, you need to figure out who has choices, who doesn't have choices, what's available, and as things change throughout the course of the year, and as you've talked about in your safety plan, how is that dynamic going to change as more options become available, or hopefully available, to our kids who have no choices today? Thank you.
I thank the public for their comments. Again, if there's anyone else that would like to speak, if you'd please line up now.
Amanda Martino, Lower Frederick. So I work in the healthcare industry, and you know, when I think about my mother-in-law who talks about polio, we don't have polio anymore. We have a vaccine that literally was given out to children in a sugar cube in 1955. And by 1979, we had eradicated polio in America. My children are too young for a vaccine. I would love for them to have a vaccine tomorrow. But I recognize, because in my workplace and in my job, I am responsible for sending information down to the FDA. That is my job. I send data down every day to have them review and look at that data to evaluate whether my drug product is safe enough and effective for use in people, adults, children, throughout the country. So I understand why we need the data, and I understand how important vaccines are on a day-to-day basis. And my mother-in-law had a child, as a child, went to school one day, and the polio vaccine was given out. One kid was absent. He died 2 weeks later from polio because he wasn't there. He didn't get the vaccine. Had he had that, he would have saved a life. She remembers that to this day. She talks about it. And I just think that the health and safety plan that was updated is a great proposal. I think it's a good way to get us started in getting everybody back to safety. I want to thank Dr. Russell and the health and safety team for updating the health and safety plan to better align with the CDC, the AAP, the Montgomery County Office of Public Health recommendations. The changes to require masks for all students, staff, and visitors, and updating the distancing in the lunchroom will help the virus mitigation efforts for the unvaccinated. I urge the board to approve the updated plan. It will help ensure the safety of all our children when we return in full person learning in the fall. With the ever-changing metrics and outlooks, we need to do our part to help reduce the viral load in the community at large. I applaud PV for acting now, helping and hoping to avoid disasters. We are seeing school-age children returning to classrooms in Arizona, Louisiana, and Florida. The masking will also decrease the burden on contact tracing and allow students to have reduced disruption of learning due to quarantine measures. The current expectation is that all students will learn asynchronously each time a student needs to quarantine from possible exposure. For the elementary students and their families, this could be burdensome, and a student will be largely on their own to learn the material. I urge the board to come up with a plan to develop something where the students will have some other option to learn virtually, especially the elementary schools, where the burden is left on the parents when their children are learning asynchronously. Thank you for your school board and the district to help educate our future generation of leaders, especially in these difficult and challenging times.
Matt Taylor, Perkiomen Township. A gentleman came up here earlier tonight talking about the board and their engagement with the speakers and with the parents in general. There's no follow-up, there's no... when they ask you if there are any questions, when you're ready to vote on something, somebody please ask a question. I'm sitting in here in the audience last 4 or 5 months listening to people vote. Did you discuss it beforehand? Was it already factored in? Ask questions. Ask what time it is, anything. Thank you.
Okay, I'm going to close public comment at this time. We're going to move on to section 2, reports. Are there any updates to any of the reports from anyone? Okay. So we'll move on to section 3, consent agenda. I need a motion to approve the consent agenda developed on August 2nd, 2021.
Motion.
Second.
Have a motion and a second. Are there any questions? Seeing none, all those in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion carries. Section 4 on education, I'll turn it over to Dr. Kolar.
Thank you, Mrs. Evans Brockett. Item 4.01 is the education update, part 2. Mrs. Smith and Dr. Russell will be presenting that tonight.
We're going to take a brief recess so the board can use the restroom as needed. Call the meeting back to order if everyone would find a seat. And I'll turn it back over to Dr. Russell and Mrs. Smith.
Thank you, Mrs. Evans-Brockett. And this evening, I will start through our education updates, part 2, and then Mrs. Smith will pick up the second half. We want to talk to you tonight about health and safety, some of the updates that many of you have read in our plan that was published this morning, as well as virtual options for some of our families who are opting for that learning mode. I did want to echo some of Mrs. Evans-Brockett's comments of earlier and express or extend thanks and appreciation to those of you that have taken the time to compose an email or to contact me directly for conversation. It helps to inform my thinking for sure, and it's always good to hear from the community and learn what you're thinking. I also wanted to follow up last week's comments, and I did this earlier this summer after some commentary that raised questions with a follow-up at the following meeting, if you will, not to use the word following too many times. But last week, there were some really disheartening and discouraging comments that were offered by some individuals whose experiences in our school involved bullying. And I wanted the board and the public to know that those individuals that commented have been followed up upon, and we'll have some conversations about the experiences in our schools. This is something we take very seriously, and it's our mission to cultivate inclusive school communities. So it's very helpful to me to learn what may be happening at times and what I can do, what action steps we as an administration and staff can take to alleviate some of those things. So I do appreciate those of you that felt comfortable enough to come forward and know that administration is working to follow up. So this evening, as I mentioned, we want to talk a little bit about the health and safety updates, and I'd like to really provide you with some deeper explanation as to the why, and we'll talk about virtual instruction. Last week, there were goals presented. As we approach the new year, there really are 5 goals that we've zeroed in on that hopefully will capture what it is we're about as we're thinking about the 21-22 school year. And number 1 is to operate our schools in a manner that, to the best of our ability, maintains health and safety of all, and not only for those in our school, but for the larger community. And secondly, we are very excited and looking forward to on-site school this year, 5 days a week, in person for our students. That was questionable for a long time last year, and we're appreciative of the guiding agencies who are supporting us in that endeavor, kids back in school and keeping them in school. We've learned that the vast majority of our students learn best in person. Not all, but the vast majority do. So we're looking forward to supporting that effort of getting our kids back on site. We'll talk to you tonight about that virtual instruction alternative. It's really this year about delivering instruction on site to our students, or that virtual mode that some of our families have come to appreciate and, under the circumstances of the pandemic, prefer. So we'll talk to you about that. We certainly want to maintain those extracurricular activity opportunities, clubs, et cetera, that we know support that social and emotional development of our students and really can just make school more enjoyable. And we certainly, this year, coming back, hopefully right out of the gate running, so to speak, want to meet the needs of all of our students, academically, socially, and emotionally, which is always a goal. We are observing the incidence and positivity rates increase over time at the county level. These are data from the beginning of July versus now the beginning of August. So the case increases is one of the reasons I have shifted my recommendation in the health and safety plan. Last year, we really looked at the county data consistently. We were directed really to look at county data. And that could look different if we zeroed in on each of the districts in Montgomery County. the incidence and positivity rates could look different for different districts in Montgomery County. This year, we are being encouraged to look at our local or community data, which is really comprised of the 6 municipalities that make up our school district. So these incidence rates that you see here, beginning of July and end of July, are published on the Montgomery County Office of Public Health website, as are the percent positivities. And for our local district, the local data have also demonstrated an increase. We are seeing more cases within our community. So in our plan, based upon the increase in cases and also the opportunity with the way they've restructured quarantine this year, I am asking the board to consider recommending or requiring, masks this year to follow the guidance of the CDC and the spirit of the CDC's guidance. The spirit of OPH is that everybody inside should be wearing a mask. In a congregate setting, we do the best that we can do to mitigate transmission. If we layer those mitigation measures, masking is one of them. So that's being recommended by those guiding agencies as something that we have in place in our schools, and that's what I'm supporting this evening. If students are wearing masks and 3 feet or more apart, confirmed positive to an exposed student, both wearing masks, the exposed does not need to quarantine. That's a big advantage over last year. So again, if I go back to the goals, we want our students on site. Wearing a mask will help keep our students on site and in school and avoid that quarantine, which is part of Montgomery County Office of Public Health code. We don't have any flexibility with that. We have to follow those rules. Additionally, this year, and in hearing some of the feedback from individuals this evening as well as previous to tonight, we know that our students will benefit from mask breaks. Regular mask breaks will be something we incorporate this year and do a lot better with than years past. Students will not be wearing masks outside, that's at least not recommended, nor will they be wearing them in lunch, of course. So there will be a different approach to supporting our students with that particular mitigating measure. If we move on to social or physical distancing, as it's called now, the county and the CDC has shifted their recommendation to physical distancing being 3 feet. This language comes right from the documents that are published by both of those organizations. And it's a minimum of 3 feet that we will work to establish in our classrooms. And typically, when a student is seated next to another, desk to desk, it's 3 feet. Last year, we worked really diligently to get to 6 feet, and then 4 to 6 feet, when that changed over time as we learned more. This year, it will be 3 feet. In the lunchrooms where students do not have access to a vaccine, we are aiming for 6 feet to the extent feasible. So in elementary and 6th grade, we'd really like to separate those students when they're unmasked a little bit further. When students are riding buses, when students are in lunch, when students are in their classrooms, there will be assigned seats for the purposes of contact tracing. So that's called out in the plan here. We are also, and this was in the plan last week's draft, upholding the CDC's order to mandate masks on buses. I didn't mention earlier, I didn't mean to neglect that, there will be an exemption opportunity for masking. I know that some of you have expressed some concerns about medical conditions or mental health issues, 504 plans, IEPs. These situations will be discussed at the building level, and exemptions are something that our families can qualify for. And there'll be more detailed information coming out about that. So students will be expected to also wear masks on buses. They are required. This is the daily symptom monitoring. Again, this is a big part of our operations. We all became pretty accustomed to this, coming to school every day. Staff, students, any visitors. If you don't feel well, don't come to school, don't come into the building. So this too will again be emphasized this year and something we follow up on a regular basis. And encourage of our students. This is the modified quarantine. So again, if I'm a confirmed positive and Dr. Kolar is exposed to me, we're both wearing masks, we're 3 feet or more apart. Last year, she would have had to quarantine for 7 to 10 days. 10 days unless she got a negative test on day 5. Then she can come back day 7. This year, the county has shifted that. There's no longer the need to quarantine or the requirement to quarantine if we're both wearing masks. That's helpful to keeping our students in school. There's been a question about quarantine versus isolation. Quarantine is when a student or a staff member has been exposed to a confirmed positive and needs to be removed from the congregate setting to make sure that they don't develop those symptoms of COVID-19. When someone is placed in isolation, they are a confirmed positive and really need to remove themselves completely from other individuals. This is just, again, a review of the information that was published by the Montgomery County Office of Public Health on July 29th. This came out after the CDC published the day prior their updates around universal masking. That's what they're encouraging and believing is best for students, and I do as well. This pulls out some of the aspects of the health and safety plan that are being highlighted tonight. Again, the slides will be published, and if it's a helpful reference, please shift to it. These are the key takeaways from the CDC. They were published August 5th, and again, just repeat some of what I've shared and some of what is influencing what is being recommended in the updated draft for our health and safety plan. This is a summary, and I did also want to call out last year, we implemented a half-day model. When we had to de-densify, and we're really hoping that doesn't happen this year, when we had to reduce the number of students in our classes, in our schools, we shifted to that half-day model at the elementary level. We really wanted students in school as much as possible, so they were here with us 5 days a week for at least a half a day. Second half of the day was asynchronous, while at the secondary level, we moved into that hybrid model, which I have shared in public previously was really challenging. We are not recommending the hybrid model this year. If we get into a position where we are directed and have to de-densify, it is the half-day model that would be recommended for all levels, if we get there. We're hoping we don't, and there is no talk of us needing to go there. But I did want to just let you know that appears in the health and safety plan, a little bit more explanation around that. So you'll see some of the other points, again, I don't have to read over them, that were just called out as some of the updates in the health and safety plan. Going back to those goals, we want to operate our schools in a way that serves both our students, staff, and community the best it can in maintaining health and safety. We can never ensure that it will be perfect or to 100% we'll be able to accomplish something, but there are steps we can take that increase the likelihood there will be less transmission of the disease, that we will mitigate the spread of the disease, and that's really what these recommendations in this health and safety plan includes to start the school year. Secondly, we want to do everything we can to afford students on-site instruction. We don't want students to be in a position of having to quarantine. We'd really like to avoid that, of course. The last point that I'll make is that there are ongoing conversations. They're not stopping, and as things change around us and influence those conversations, and I'm referring to the Montgomery County Office of Public Health, the CDC, the American Academy of Pediatrics, as these conversations continue, I will encourage us as a board to also continue those discussions, to ask questions, and to reconsider some of what might exist at a given time. That's what we did last year, and I would aim for the same thing this year. So at this point, if there are questions from board members, Mrs. Evans-Brockett, I would be happy to entertain those.
Board member have a question for Dr. Russell? Dr. Kolar.
You were talking about the quarantine, that the guidance has changed, that if they're 3 feet apart and wearing masks, they don't have to quarantine. If a child has a mask exemption and they're not masked, how does that exemption play into whether or not they need to quarantine?
Unfortunately, if a student is without a mask, they would be obligated to quarantine. They could take a test on day 5. If the test is negative, they could return to school on day 7. Otherwise, it's day 10.
And then I have one more question, if that's okay. So right now, it looks like our district is in the moderate, if I'm going back to that slide, we're in the moderate level. So can we talk about a plan to shift recommendations if we do go back to the low level like we were in the spring or earlier this summer?
I would really be interested in discussing that. Initially, when the guidance first came out from Montgomery County, it was based on thresholds, which seemed to make a lot of sense to me from my vantage point and what I've learned about this virus. So I would be very interested in setting a threshold or considering that as a board. If we drop from moderate to low, do we shift from masks required to masks recommended or optional, as we had started out earlier on when we were in that low? So I am very much in favor of that consideration on the part of our board, yes.
Just to follow up on Dr. Kolar's question about the quarantine, should there be an exemption with exposure? Does vaccination then eliminate that need?
That's a really important question, and I was speaking with a representative today about that. Right now, the county information that's been published indicates if we're 3 feet apart, if I go back to that same scenario, I'm the positive, Dr. Kolar is exposed to me, we're 3 feet or more apart, we're both wearing masks. She doesn't have to quarantine. If she's vaccinated, she doesn't have to quarantine. There is a question about whether or not that person is wearing a mask, and we're actually going to ask that of the county. So that aspect of the modified quarantine has left a question in the minds of others as well, and so we're going to pursue an answer to that.
And then I guess just a follow-up to that point, for the children that are not of a vaccination age, I'm assuming then the protocol just would stay just as you stated it, since it's just a non-option. Is that accurate? Or would they fall to the quarantine requirement with the test?
They do, unless they're both masked and 3 feet or further apart. Okay. Did I answer your question?
You did. I
Okay.
just wanted to just clarify. And then I guess my last point, and then I think the rest of it I understand pretty clearly, is about the revisiting piece of things. So understanding that we would obviously, with new information, revisit, is it something that's been discussed about just making it a standard business item to always revisit this monthly? Or are you more thinking that we'll just revisit as new information's available?
Well, I think that would be a really important question to review with Mrs. Evans-Brockett, and whether or not this becomes a part of the education updates agenda every month certainly makes some sense to me. I know we've talked about that. When there is new guidance published, we are obligated to review our plan. Whether or not we feel as a board it would make sense to do that on a regular basis, I can certainly, there always seems to be something to talk about. So, I could see where maybe it would be a few minutes versus maybe it would be 20 minutes, but that may become something that's very practical, we see as very practical.
Just to piggyback on that, I think it will be a part of the regular monthly meeting. I think it's more of an issue, or we've said as a board that should things change when we don't have a board meeting scheduled, we'll schedule a special board meeting to make changes as needed because of how important this is. Mrs. Maris, you had your hand raised.
Thank you. Excuse me. I'm very interested in when, hopefully sooner rather than later, we move back to low incidence in the community reconvening and talking about, I mean, I would like us to go back to what we originally proposed to the community, where the mask would be recommended. But I also would like to just make sure that we're watching when the vaccines become available for the younger students, and really keep an eye on that so that when it's been a reasonable amount of time, that we can also revisit looking at our recommendation for removing the making it strongly recommended instead of what we're proposing now.
Are there any other questions from board members at this time? Okay, thank you, Dr. Russell.
So Mrs. Smith is going to talk a little bit about virtual instruction. And if I may, just to introduce her just another minute or so, there has been some really genuine and dedicated advocacy on the part of some in our community that, again, I would like to extend appreciation for. Individuals who were thankful for the virtual setup last year. It worked for them, it worked for their children, again, under the circumstances of the pandemic. So I want to recognize that. And some really important questions for administration about the current model for virtual instruction that we put out last week. So last week we said to our board, administration would go back, consider some options and the costs associated with those options, the number of students we know to date that are interested in a virtual mode, and report out tonight. So Mrs. Smith will share with you some of the options, and the costs associated with them that may work and serve our students better than maybe what we had originally put on the table. So we'll talk that through. So Mrs. Smith.
Good evening, everyone. Thank you, Dr. Russell and School Board, for a few minutes just to talk about some of our virtual options. Just wanted to update you on what our enrollment projections in Viking Academy look like at this time. You've seen the May numbers from the May survey when we surveyed our parents for quite a while. I did give you these numbers on the right for August, are updated as of August 9th, today around noon. And you can see we're pretty holding steady around 102. Particularly in our K-5, we are right around 50 that we are looking at. And I know many of our families are waiting until after this evening's vote and maybe attending tomorrow night's parent session about virtual before verifying their instructional mode. So we'll certainly keep you up to date if these numbers change. So I thought I would start with the secondary and work down towards the elementary. So our Viking Academy in grades 9 to 12 really looks like what our virtual offering was pre-pandemic. We've always had a virtual program at our high school where some students took advantage of this, whether they were full-time or part-time virtual. So it looks very similar in that it is an asynchronous format for those high school students. They can attend completely remotely, or they do have the option to be on site if they choose to and still participate in coursework virtually. And some of our students who take a part-time option do that, take some classes on site and then attend some of their classes virtually. Classes are semester and year-long. They work with their counselors to develop their course requests and their schedule. And we've always had a PV teacher as a liaison. She assists in monitoring progress, grades, attendance, helping with the program, schedule oversight, and she is certainly available for student support as well with kind of keeping students on track or assisting them in reaching out to the teacher of their asynchronous courses. So that will be very similar to what we've had in the past. In 6th to 12th, this should say 6th to 8th grade there for our middle school. We have both that asynchronous format that I just spoke about as we have for our high school students, and then we also have a partially synchronous format. And this was something that we added this year because of not having that hybrid in place as we did last year. We wanted and recognized that our students need some synchronous connection with their teachers. And so this is really how the agreement with Warren County came about, in looking for a cyber option that would have some synchronous connection with the teachers. So this is still remote learning. It is daily asynchronous learning. There is available teacher support, but there is also a weekly synchronous learning for each core course. So meaning once a week I have time with my English language arts teacher, once a week time with math, and so forth, so that there is that connection. Again, semester year-long courses, developing your schedule with the counselor and administration. And what we intend to do this year is the teacher who oversaw our virtual program in the past, mainly at the high school, we would be extending those responsibilities into our middle school so that she can assist with those tasks of monitoring grades, attendance, and so forth, as well as setting up a daily time where our PV students can synchronously connect with her to talk about maybe something they're struggling with or assist with how to connect with something or just a general question that they may have. So hoping to provide an additional connection back to PV with one of our own teachers. So the next slides are really mainly focusing on K-5 as that's where most of our concerns and questions have really come about in the last couple of weeks. We recognize that our youngest learners need the most attention in terms of that connection with a teacher. So this slide just really shows you what is currently approved that we have put forth at this time. So similarly, the asynchronous format on the left that we've talked about. But again, that partnership with Warren County that some have referred to is a partially synchronous format. Again, we were looking for a way to have our elementary students have a daily connection with a teacher. And so in this model, where in the middle school it's a weekly synchronous session, in this model it is every single day English language arts and mathematics instruction from their assigned teacher. Again, semester year-long courses and a PV teacher to serve as a liaison in terms of some of those logistics with our students. So these slides now, and again, the conversations that we have heard, we recognize Virtual Voyage 2.0. Those of you that participated in that last year, we've heard some really great successes, and we know our teachers worked really hard. And so we have a desire to increase that level of synchronous instruction for our students. We also have heard very clearly, and we're really proud to say that we do believe that our teachers provide the best instruction to our students. And so wanting to see how can we have more interaction with our own teachers. We also do want to be fiscally responsible, and we want to maintain class sizes in both in-person and virtual. We believe that they should all be within our school board policy guidelines. So these slides we have looked and bring forth to you this evening 4 different options that we have considered. You'll notice that one on the far right we are not recommending, but we wanted you to know that we did consider it and weigh that. And I'll talk through each of these options, starting with option A. So this is the recommended from administration, the option, and this is really the fully synchronous with our own Perkiomen Valley teachers. It's basically the same as what we offered last year to our elementary students in grades K to 5. It's that Virtual Voyage 2.0 model. They're assigned a PV teacher. It's their section, it's their teacher, and they receive all of their instruction from that teacher. It does require 5.5 regular education teachers to be assigned to this Viking Academy. And based upon the special education students that may be enrolled or selecting virtual, we may also need to hire an additional teacher for special education support. The far right financial impacts just gives you an idea about what we budget for a full-time teacher here at Perkiomen Valley. That may be a little on the high side depending upon the level of experience and education that a teacher may come to us with. The next slide gets into those financial impacts just a little bit more for you and the staffing. So I mentioned 5.5 teachers. That is for a full-time teacher for each of the grades, 1st through 5, and then the 0.5 is for kindergarten because that is a half-day program. So there are a couple of ways that we can do this, and we're, again, trying to be fiscally responsible. We do have what's called a K+ program here at Perkiomen Valley, and that is an intensive intervention that starts in kindergarten for students that we've identified through our screening. They attend a half-day kindergarten, and then they stay the other half of the day, and they receive this level of intervention. During the pandemic last year, we did not have a K+ program. We used those staff members to be able to have smaller class sizes across all of our kindergartens. So we could remove that program again this coming year in 21-22 and take those 2.5 teachers that are assigned there and have them provide instruction within the Viking Academy. So we could cover, as you can see, 2 full grades and the kindergarten through that, leaving us to need to hire 3 teachers to get to that 5.5. And we would propose 3 temporary teachers just for the 21-22 school year. And again, dependent upon our special education enrollment, I do have some numbers if you'd like to know that. We may or may not need to have additional support there. Now you may be wondering, well, if we don't have this K+ program, what can we do for our students? And typically the K+ program really supports our Title I students in both South and Schwenksville Elementary as they are our qualifying schools. In lieu of that, we have received increased funding in Title I programming this year, if you recall from last week's presentation, almost double what we typically get. So those 2 schools are anticipating increasing staffing in the Title I schools, and we could use that staffing to still provide supports to our youngest learners. And so we feel that would be and an appropriate way to still provide the level of intervention that we'd like to target those students. So if we look to hire those 3 temporary teachers, you can see the cost there, and we would be recommending utilizing our COVID reserves. As you have, budgetarily with Mr. Weaver, set aside some of those funds, we feel that's an appropriate expenditure. And if we need that 1 special education teacher, we still do have 1 contract that we have not filled, and so we could utilize that, therefore not being a direct impact to the budget because these positions would be either in the budget or utilizing COVID reserve funds to cover that. So option B, kind of taking a step back from that, when you look at our enrollment numbers, maybe option A is not something that you want to commit to, so we wanted to provide you with some other options. So option B is partially synchronous, meaning we would still continue our partnership with Warren County, and our students would have their daily synchronous ELA and math, but we would also then have PV teacher support to have daily synchronous time with them on the other part of the day where they can connect with a PV teacher who would be able to work with the Warren County platform, the teachers, to know, oh, this is the topic coming up this week. Maybe they do some pre-teaching, maybe they do some reteaching or answering of questions, small group support, but giving that connection with a PV teacher. This would require 3 regular education teachers where they would each support 2 grades. For example, maybe I would support grades 4 and 5, and then I would have part of my day I would work with 4th grade students and part of my day with 5th. And again, we would need to look at our special education enrollment. So similarly, you can see those 3 temporary teachers and the costs associated with the COVID reserves, or in this option, only needing those 3, we could reassign 2 of the K+ teachers and only hire 1 temporary teacher, if you chose, again, that K+ option. Option C is, again, a step in that we would still continue the partnership with Warren County, but instead of having a PV teacher, a certified teacher providing those supports, we could have paraprofessionals providing those supports. So again, 1 person assigned to 2 grade levels, and they would provide maybe some reteaching and so forth and support for students and that connection back to PV. And you can see the cost difference here then from the previous slide of almost $300,000 to utilizing 3 full-time paras down to about $170,000, which again could be utilized COVID reserve funds for. And then option D is really the one that we are not recommending, but again, we wanted you to know that we tried to consider everything. This would be to implement a hybrid model, which was the model used in our secondary schools last year, which really did demonstrate many difficulties for our students as well as our staff. This would be a teacher per grade level per building, so a much larger number of teachers being impacted and students teaching both in person and virtual at the same time. We certainly have the technology to do this, our current staff available to do that. It is not recommended from administration, though, as the best model for our learners. So just some things to consider. I mentioned option A is really what we are recommending at this time. We believe it's the best learning environment for our virtual students. It would maintain class sizes in both in-person and virtual and actually provide some greater flexibility for movement between them. Because if a child needed to move back to in-person at a particular time during the year, we would still have small enough class sizes in our in-person to be able to accommodate them. And it is our curriculum and our teachers delivering that. Some things, though, for you to just points to consider with option A. I just thought I would point out for you the average cost for a general education student who attends a cyber school is that 14,000 number. We have about 50 students right now in the K-5 program. You can see what those numbers would look like if all of those families should choose to go to a cyber. I mentioned movement between the modes of instruction. We would like to identify specified times for that to happen this year just to help us with logistics. Maybe that's trimesters or semesters that we can think about where we might have an opportunity for that movement. But we do want our families to know very clearly that these would be dedicated virtual teachers, so if they made a choice to move to in-person, they would be changing their teacher at that time or vice versa. And virtual enrollments, hopefully we're all hoping our students get vaccinated and that the pandemic gets better and we maybe don't need the virtual option as much. If our enrollments would decline to less than 5, we would want to consider or recommend that we maybe phase away from that fully synchronous for 5 or less students to maybe using that option B where we still have those teachers providing supports, but we're utilizing our partnership with Warren County. And certainly if we hire temporary teachers this year and we end up, morphing into an option B, we absolutely have many needs that those teachers could fill as the year goes through in terms of substituting or helping with interventions. We've been worried about our learning loss and so forth. And then the last point I'll just make is that what if our virtual enrollment increases? What if the pandemic doesn't go the way we'd like and more families want virtual? We would have to recognize that we want to maintain the same class size guidelines. So a third grade teacher in person or virtual, would have maybe those 20 students in front of them, but we wouldn't want to go over that. So if we have more than 20, we would need to revisit, do we need another teacher, or what options are available there? And I believe that is the last one. So Mrs. Evans-Brockett, I'd be happy to entertain questions if there are any.
Thank you, Mrs. Smith. Are there any questions from board members? Mrs. Lofton.
So I actually have several questions, and I guess my first question is that school starts in 3 weeks, and parents don't even know about this plan. And so how would we possibly even pick one, communicate it to parents, figure out whether we have the numbers to support equitable class sizes across virtual and in person, get people enrolled, hire teachers, and be ready to go in 3 weeks?
A good question, Mrs. Lofton. So I believe we have certainly been communicating throughout the summer about what some of our options were looking like, and that's really why this came about. We had some parents really expressing a desire to have more synchronous. We have a parent night is scheduled for tomorrow night, August 10th at 7 o'clock, that we are doing a webinar basically for the purpose of providing the information about virtual. So should the board give us some direction tonight, we can certainly include that. Right now, it includes the 2 approved options from the school board. So we would plan to communicate through that. I know Dr. Russell was considering a communication tomorrow to our families just about the updates with the health and safety plan, that we would include that as well. And Mrs. Baker and I have been taking many calls throughout, even these weeks, and indicating what maybe might be considered. We are prepared and ready with registration in the asynchronous, in the partially synchronous, and if we can hire the teachers, it's actually easier to be ready to do it with our own teachers. The principals are certainly aware, and we've been keeping this list up to date of our enrollment numbers.
So then my follow-up question, going back to the slide that you had with the numbers of individuals who had expressed an interest per grade, there's the one. For the 13, the 12, we're still, our policy for class size for kindergarten through 2nd grade is 18 to 21 students. So we're not hitting that in any grade level. I could see once we're in double digits making an argument. I have a hard time pulling a teacher from another classroom or eliminating our K+ programming for a classroom with 3 students or 4 students. So, again, how are we ensuring an equity of experience if you're going to dedicate, is there a threshold if we're not hitting? You had suggested if 5 or under, we wouldn't have a teacher for that grade level. So, just how are you going to, when are you going to make that cutoff? Is it going to be next week that you're going to make a decision based on who wants to be in the program, based on new information coming out of this evening? Or, when are we going to actually make that decision? Because, I imagine teacher assignments come out next week. So I just, logistically, I don't see how all the pieces are coming together here.
So I think August 12th will be a very important day for us to see how these numbers go, and based upon whatever the board should choose to approve with the health and safety plan tonight, I think some parents will make decisions one way or another. 5 was the number that we have talked about as being kind of a trigger to, it not necessarily being fiscally responsible to have a teacher. I agree, it's a big commitment to have a full-time teacher at that cost dedicated to such a small number of students. But the pandemic, I think, has caused us to really think differently, and we really want to provide that level of education to our students, that they're receiving the same level of education. Their class size might be a lot smaller, but if you think about last year, we had some pretty small class sizes as well. And knowing that we are going to have some gaps and learning loss maybe to accommodate, we feel like we should be able to offer this option to our families. Certainly August 12th, if these numbers change drastically, Mrs. Lofton, we will have to rethink and pivot and come back to you and say, here's what we're recommending at this time. And that decision about fiscal responsibility and where you're willing to commit that is certainly a decision that weighs with you. And we are looking for you to help guide us in where your comfort level is. I don't know, Dr. Russell, if you want to add anything.
I think you hit the points. The only other thing I would mention is we did talk about an option where we split a teacher over 2 grades because the numbers are pretty low. So to Mrs. Lofton's point, that is raising questions for us as well, and we want to be fiscally responsible, just to echo what Mrs. Smith is saying. So we did talk about relying upon Warren County for the curricula and their synchronous time with our students and supplementing it with a teacher who would split half-time between, say, first and second grades and third and fourth grade. So we would work something like that out so it would reduce the number of staff that would be needed.
And that is your option B?
Yes.
Okay. And then just another, I have many questions and I'm so sorry, but you talked about pulling teachers from other classrooms, and so I imagine that involves consolidating other classrooms. And would all of our classrooms where you're pulling a teacher from an in-person instruction, would everything still remain within our recommended class sizes per policy?
So we're actually not pulling teachers from our general education classrooms or class sizes. So the numbers you see on the enrollment report this month include every student, regardless of what mode they selected, so that we would see what our maximum class sizes could be. It's the K+ program, which again is that intervention program. So it's not their kindergarten class. It's in addition to their kindergarten class. So that's what we would not be utilizing this year, which gives us those 2.5 teachers, so that we only would need to hire 3. So we're not pulling any out of our current class sizes or our current teaching. Those that are assigned to on-site, would certainly remain on-site. It's that K+ program, which again, we did not offer last year either because we were concerned about our class sizes in kindergarten.
Heather, this way. Thank you for putting this together. I think it's really clear how you presented it this week. I think my main concern about the enrollment poll that you did in August, just recently, is that had this presentation been presented prior to polling who would commit, I think the numbers would have been different. So I don't think that afforded families enough information to really make a true choice, especially since the Warren County option, which, although I agree is better than our normal virtual, is in no way comparable to what an in-school, in-building education or VV 2 point whatever it turned out to be last year. So I think that if parents had this information, and hopefully through tomorrow's informational session, question and answer, you can gauge more interest. My question really comes down to whether or not you feel like you have the ability to do that right now, or do we need to take some sort of action to allow you to gather that information and provide this option?
So I will speak to the numbers and our timeline, and then I will defer to Dr. Russell or our solicitor regarding action that may be needed. We know the clock is ticking, school's starting really soon. So we knew where the board meetings were going to fall in the conversations, and we put the parent night tomorrow night so that purposely parents had at least a day or two prior to that. We're asking for them to verify by the 12th. So let's say a family even already verified with us and said, yep, I'm gonna come back on site, and now they're just not comfortable doing that. They can still, complete that form again. We're checking it daily. Dr. Parr is going in and we're changing those numbers, and then these are live numbers. I happened to pull them at noon today. But so if they, decide after tonight, I want to make a change because now I like this virtual option, they could still do that. So hopefully everybody will get the information that we can blast out there, come to the meeting tomorrow night, and they can feel they can make a good informed decision for them. But we certainly need some direction from the board as to what can I present tomorrow night. So I will defer to answer the question about action.
And then just really quickly to follow up on that, my other concern is the lack of information about when exactly they will need to commit by. And I know that the response is, you only have the data of people that actually took the time to respond, correct? So if, we have 3,000 families and only 500 responded, these numbers are also not accurate. So in what way can we really truly gather what the true commitment is per child in this short fashion, so we can actually implement and make classes and whatnot? Because I'm imagining that's all been happening behind the scenes, of course, in our buildings. So there are children that perhaps would unenroll in some instances based on the health and safety plan. There are, also the virtual option, and then there are also children that would then go to the buildings with a health and safety plan falling one way or the other. So I realize time is against us, as it has been for the last, year and a half. But I just want to be aware of the fact that had we had this information to examine, and hindsight's always 20/20, obviously, I think that we would have seen different results, and I want to make sure that we're just not shortchanging any family's ability to make the right decision based on circumstance.
So we can communicate again, the next 2 days we intended to communicate more. And not all families needed to respond. So the way that the verification came out was if your information is correct, you don't need to do anything. So we're not looking or seeking to receive information back from 5,000 families. We just really need to hear from those that the mode that they got in their email is not what they desire for their child now. So hopefully they will see our emails, and maybe it needs to be a phone call. We'll have to talk about that tomorrow. What's the best way to make sure everybody has heard that? And then that they would verify by the 12th. Principals do have planned for these students to be in the on-site classes. You see that in the numbers that we've put. So it's a matter of pulling them out of there and setting up their coursework, which we can do pretty quickly when it's internally and it's our own teachers.
Mrs. Maris.
Thank you. I have a couple questions. So, because this is a newer plan, and you're stating it, I'm talking about option A, that you're going to utilize COVID funds, COVID reserves. I'm wondering, what are we shifting? What are we taking? Because we had, to my understanding, planned out how we were using our COVID reserves. Are we making a change to, if we go with option A, what are we changing in how we use our reserves?
I believe the COVID reserves was designed so that as things came up throughout the pandemic, we would have those funds available to us. So I don't believe that every penny of that is assigned to a particular item. It was designed to be there for as our needs came up, and we felt this was a really appropriate use of those funds and would not impact the budget or our taxpayers. But certainly Mr. Weaver could speak to that, or Dr. Russell if you'd like further information on the budget.
Okay. Do you know approximately how many students attended K+ before we weren't offering it because of COVID?
I would, and I would certainly defer to the principals here, but so I'm trying to think back to numbers to 2 years ago. We typically have run a K+ in the AM and PM in both of the title schools, and we try to keep that number of students to be, I'm going to say 10 to 12 or less. And sometimes it is less. It's really an intensive intervention. So, South may have had, you think of a maximum amount of 20 students, Schwenksville about that many. And then Evergreen and Skipback have always combined, and they share that 10. And they combine. And I think it's very rare that we hit the 10. He's shaking his head, thank you. So, but that we try to, keep it that it's going to be 10 or less.
Okay, and so I don't quite understand, because you're saying we got an increase in Title I funds, and how does that offset taking away the K+ class? I'm not understanding that.
Sure. So our Title I funds that we receive, we typically get around, let's say, $250,000. We have close to $500,000 that has been awarded to us this year that you've approved the allocations this evening. The largest chunk of our Title I funds always goes towards staffing. And so given that we have additional funds in Title I, we thought that we could hire additional staffing in those Title I schools to provide a level of intervention. We can focus those interventions on the kindergarten students while they're here with us for the half day. We can talk about, is there ways to keep them here longer if we're able to feasibly do that. And we could also provide additional supports into those other primary grades, first and second. So while we wouldn't be giving a 3-hour intensive intervention to this small group of kids in K+, we do believe that we could actually hire additional staff and still provide a level of intervention to kindergarten as well as even into first and second for those youngest learners as they're learning to read.
Would you foresee that happening in the classroom? Would you foresee, because kindergarten is such a finite time, unfortunately, for our students, it's a really short period of time that the teachers have with them. How do you, I guess I'm a little concerned about their ability, those students that need more intensive interventions, which it looks, to my mind, it looks like we're talking about approximately 50 students in the district.
I would say 50 is probably on the high end. I can pull
Okay.
the numbers for you and share that in the memo if you would like historical. I'm going to guess we were around like 35, 40 max any given
Okay.
year. what I know in talking with Mr. DeAndrea and Mrs. Venza, the Title I principals, they have talked about the interventions could be push into the classroom while the student is there with the rest of their class. It could be small group, in the back of the room and supporting a small group that these students are in. They also have the intervention time, the I&E is also built into that K schedule. Even though it's a half-day schedule, they do have a short amount of time, so that could then be also that pull-out time. And I'm sure they will think creatively about, are there other options? I know Dr. Russell and I have talked about, could those students stay maybe, an hour longer from their half day and receive some sort of intervention? Could we work the transportation to then, transport them home while the other half day is coming in? So we certainly can think about other ways to meet the needs of those kids.
And my last question is, do you have an idea of a number of special education students who are requesting virtual right now?
Thank you for asking, because that was what was on my little paper. I figured somebody would ask me that. So right now in K to 5, we have 1 student with a 504, 3 that are identified as gifted, and 10 with an IEP. If you're looking across K to 12, we have 20 students that have an IEP right now who have indicated in the survey that they are interested in Viking Academy. And, Dr. Boyd and I were just talking earlier, that is 20 is pretty equivalent to a caseload for any of our, on-site special education teachers.
Sorry, it's 20K to 12.
20K to 12.
Which, okay. Thank you.
Dr. Kohler. My question kind of is related to what Mrs. Lofton was talking about earlier with the enrollment projections. So obviously these can change because parents have until the 12th and they may have new information to consider, but if you look at this now, we have 1 kindergarten student, so we couldn't, in my mind, have a 1 student virtual kindergarten classroom unless you're thinking maybe we could, but I guess what I'm thinking is we have this recommendation for option A, but there is also an option B, and I wonder if we need to consider it grade by grade, that, this grade has enough to do option A, but these 2 grades have 2 or 3 students, and so we may have to do some version of option B. Like, do we have to do the same thing across the board for all grades, or can we look at the numbers per grade and kind of make a plan that way?
You could certainly give us some direction in that you want to set, a limit or a bottom per se of we'd like to see this many students, and then you can move forward with option A. Otherwise, we'd like us to look at option B. I think it could certainly be by grade level. It may be a little harder to piece together if depending upon how many grade levels fall into each option, but absolutely we could work that. Did that answer your question?
Are there other questions from board members at this time? So you're looking for direction from us. So what I'm gathering, and please correct me if I'm wrong, is that perhaps we need to set a minimum number of students per grade in order for it to warrant a teacher. Is that where our comfort level is?
So I would suggest, that, a minimum number of students per teacher. So it could be, if you K1 and 2 all have 1 student, just theoretically, I would, again, I would say, and I'm thinking maybe once we hit the double-digit threshold, potentially is about where I would say, oh, I apologize. So I would think that once we hit the double-digit threshold, that's where I would be comfortable justifying a teacher per double-digit cohort of students, and it could be, and I don't know how you divide up the day, but also if you only have 2 or 3 kids in your class, each student is going to have so much more individualized instruction than you are going to have when you have a class with 23 students in it. So I think that does sort of balance it out, that you're not having that full day synchronous experience if you're only participating with a small handful of students, and then it could be balanced throughout the day. And I think that also allows for some equity for teachers as well, so that it's fair for teachers if one teacher has a caseload of 23 kids and another has a caseload of, a cohort of 3 kids. That is also, we want to have some equity and balance there.
Okay, I'm seeing head shaking from this side on a double-digit kind of number, and perhaps, you know, if we need to, obviously administration knows better on this, combine a K-1 to get to that double-digit. Is that a comfort level for board members for administration to move forward? Got yeses on this side.
I mean, I think that makes sense, but I would also maybe not draw a hard and fast line. If we have a couple of grades that are 9, I don't want to say like, nope, that's not double digits. I'd want to be able to consider what to do about that.
So it sounds to me like you have support to move this forward, and if you can give us an update of numbers in the Thursday memo, and we can ratify as necessary next month.
Thank you very much for your consideration and time.
Mrs. Lofton has another question. Hold on.
If I can add one more thought, I would much see us pull from our COVID reserve funds than eliminate our K+. So let's say we wind up across K to 5, we have 4 teachers. You know, I'm wondering if we can take that 4th teacher from our COVID fund instead of eliminating K+. So I don't know if that's possible, if there was a reason why you selected 3 as a threshold, as opposed to taking all 6 from our COVID reserve, because if I recall correctly, we still have about $3 million in our COVID reserve. Is that correct?
I think we have about $2.5 million in our COVID reserve. And remember, those were generated because of the operational savings from 1920 when we essentially stopped coming to school March 16th with our bus savings and our operational savings. So it's about $2.5 million.
So out of that $2.5 million, you know, again, I'd rather take a little bit more from that buffer that we have there than eliminate our K+. That's my take on that.
The one thing I will say about K+, though, is a lot of times that program doesn't get up and moving until October, mid-October, by the time we get our students tested. So that could be an opportunity as we're searching for teachers, that those teachers can kind of cover that need. Ms. White.
In thinking along those lines, I appreciated that there was the flexibility of the Title I funds to make up for the shift in staffing. And I would suggest that perhaps the COVID money that you just mentioned perhaps be used in our first grade year to help compensate for some of the loss those kindergartners had last year. That's just I just literally was thinking through if we have that luxury of funding, that maybe we can creatively, as you always do, figure out how to cast the net wider and capture more kids.
I can just respond to 2 of the questions that came up. Why did we pick 3 teachers to take from COVID reserves? We were trying to balance and be fiscally responsible, and knowing that we had not ran the K+ program last year, thinking that was a way to help us balance. Certainly, if the board's will is to spend more of the COVID reserves, we could certainly do that and maintain K+. And I do just want to point out, Mrs. Evans-Brockett, you are correct. In many past years, we have started the K+ program a little bit later. The principals have worked really hard, though, the last year that we offered it, and I think even maybe the year before that, they have started much closer to the year. In fact, Mr. DeAndrea whispered in my ear that, you know, his intention was to start day 1. We've gotten enough data from our screening and registration process that they feel pretty good about what that criteria is.
Mrs. Mares.
I would like to see us continue with the K+, if we can make that work. I think that's to help our students who are in need, and we know that when you help students when they're young, that only propels them instead of trying to, and I understand we're going to support them, but I would like to see us try to support K+.
Sounds like you have support for that as well.
Okay, well, thank you very much, our principals, and obviously the benefit of our students. So I appreciate that, and we will keep you updated as these numbers change so that you know what direction we're looking to go in. Thank you.
ready to move on? Item 4.02, 4.03, and 4.04 are all on consent. Item 4.05, the recommended action is a motion to approve the 2021-2022 parent-student handbooks for elementary, middle, and high schools, and I so move.
We have a motion and a second. Are there any questions? Seeing none, all those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries.
Item 4.06, the recommended action is a motion to approve the 2021-2022 PVSD Health and Safety Plan version 7 as presented, and I so move.
Second.
We have a motion and a second. Are there any questions? Seeing none, all those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries.
That concludes section 4.
Thank you, Dr. Kohler. Moving on to section 5, business, Mr. Dorr.
Thank you, Ms. Evans-Brockett. 5.01 was done last week. 5.02, there's no August report. 5.3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, and 13 are all on consent. 5.14 is a new item. There's a motion to approve the purchase of 6 sets of portable bleachers for use on the lower turf field from BSN Sports at a total cost not to exceed $27,795, and I so move.
Second.
We have a motion and a second. Are there any questions? Seeing none, all those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion carries.
That ends my section.
Thank you, Mr. Dorr. Moving on to section 6, payment of bills. Dr. Weston, please.
Thank you, Mrs. Evans-Brockett. Item 6.01, the ratification of bills and payroll and authorization of payments. The recommended action on this item is a motion to ratify the payment of bills and payroll as per the list submitted for the period ending 31 July 2021, and to authorize the payment of bills on the check and voucher registers submitted for August, and I so move.
We have a motion and a second. Are there any questions? Seeing none, all those in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion carries.
Item 6.02, the approval of the treasurer's report and financial statements. The recommended action on this item is a motion to approve the treasurer's report and financial statements, including the summary of cash and investment accounts as prepared by the administration for the period ending July 31st, 2021, and I so move.
We have a motion and a second. Are there any questions? Seeing none, all those in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion carries.
And that concludes section 6.
Thank you, Dr. Weston. Moving on to section 7, professional personnel. Ms. White, please.
Thank you, Mrs. Evans-Brockett. Item .701, 702 are on consent. 703 was action was taken on August 2nd. 704, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11 are all on consent. 7.12 was removed prior to the meeting. And 7.13 is a new item. It's a motion to approve a memo of understanding with the Perkiomen Valley Education Association, PVEA, regarding virtual instruction, and I so move.
Second.
We have a motion and a second. Are there any questions? Seeing none, all those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries.
Thank you, and that ends my section.
Thank you. Moving on to section 8, support personnel. Since Mrs. Roberts is joining us via Zoom and the audio isn't great, Mrs. Lofton, can I have you take this section, please?
Thank you, Mrs. Evans-Brockett. Section 8, support personnel. Items 801, 2, 3, and 4 are all on consent, and that concludes my section.
Wonderful, thank you. Section 9, governance. Mrs. Maris, please.
Thank you. Section 9.01, first reading on policies. 006 meetings. The following policies are presented for a first reading. 006 meetings. 006.2 meeting agendas. 903, public participation in board meetings, and 905, citizen advisory committee. Are there any questions or comments?
I will just comment that we heard the feedback on 903, and we will be returning it to committee to have further discussion. Thank you, Mrs. Mayers. Section 10, closing items.
Mrs. Evans-Brockett?
We heard the comments on 903, and we'll be bringing that back to policy committee. Closing items. Item 10.01, we will again accept comments from the audience with the same rules that applied earlier. If anyone would like to make a comment, you can come to the podium at this time.
Before my time starts, are we able to see the slide, Dr. Russell, that you showed with the positivity rate that in your presentation?
Those slides will be available to the public. At this time, we're going to move on with the agenda, though, please.
Okay, sure. So I just want to say thank you to Matt. I appreciate that you actually stepped out of the box and decided to not, play one side of the aisle versus the other. I appreciate your time and effort in that. I appreciate all the parents who gave your feedback on this. I'm appalled that we didn't hear and truly open our ears across the board what all the folks had to say in this audience tonight. What I'm upset with is, as I understand it, it's mandated now that we have to wear masks in school. Our children have to wear masks in school. You can get around that, I'll say, or you can be allowed to not wear a mask if you have a pre-existing condition or a mental reason for having not wear a mask. So what we're doing right now is we're sending our children to school, and we are making them identify as either having a physical or mental reason to not wear a mask. So you are putting them in a section and saying, yes, you are saying you are different for a physical or mental reason. That is the only reason why you're not allowed to wear a mask. If you allowed it up to choice, my daughter, some sons and daughters out here could say, you know what, my parents and I sat down and made an educated choice about this. But what you have done now is taken it out of their hands, and now I would have to go for my daughter or some folks for their daughters or sons and say, our doctor is saying there is a physical or mental reason that you have to not wear your mask. And when they come to school, their classmates are going to say, oh, I know it's not a choice. I know there is something, quote, wrong with you. And our mission, your mission statement says to give an area where they can emotionally come into school and learn and grow socially and emotionally. And what we're doing now is taking a section of those students who have anxiety, who have maybe physical conditions, they can't breathe through the mask, they have whatever issue going on, that's personal, and we're forcing them out with that and making them identify and saying that in children's words, there's something wrong with me. And I think that's appalling. I think it's horrible to do to these children, to force their hand and make them come out and say, I'm not wearing a mask, not by choice. I'm not wearing a mask because I have something going on that is personal, but now you have every reason to think there's something going on here. And I'm upset about that. And Matt, I ran against Matt several years ago. I don't know if you remember, that's Matt. And Matt and I were in different sides of things. And I absolutely applaud you for stepping up and saying and voting against this. So I appreciate that, and I appreciate all your time. Thank you.
Dawn D. Fury, Trapboro. I'd like to also thank Matt as well for standing up for parent choice. Dr. Russell talked about having follow-up conversations regarding bullying. I believe you said there's a no tolerance policy regarding bullying in our schools or something of that sort. I don't know if I'm quoting you correctly, but something of that sort. The definition of bullying is to harm, intimidate, or coerce. The definition of coerce is to persuade someone to do something by using force or threats. This is exactly what's being done to our children by requiring them to wear masks for a virus with a 99.997% recovery rate. Is restricting our children's breathing causing them anxiety, headaches, panic attacks, causing them harm? Yes, it is. Why is it no one wants to take this into consideration or value what they are experiencing? Would this type of behavior have been considered bullying in years past if a child did this to another child? Imagine one child covering another child's mouth, restricting their breathing and not giving them a choice in the matter. That would definitely be considered bullying. Does that not apply when an adult does this to a child? So once again, our children lose. It's extremely disheartening that the board continues to bring up at these meetings how you care about the social, emotional, and mental health of our children, but then make the kind of suggestions that you made tonight. You are also put up on the board symptom monitoring information. So you want children to stay home if they have shortness of breath, difficulty breathing, and headaches. But at the same time, you are inflicting these symptoms upon them by requiring them to wear a mask and not giving them a choice. Doesn't make much sense, does it? My heart goes out to parents whose children are suffering at the hands of adults and coming home every day when you pick them up telling you they have headaches, they feel confused, they're tired, they're fatigued, they have anxiety. Why don't we ask our nurses how many children come down? I've spoken to some who are suffering because they're wearing these masks. One last question for everyone to think about. Who is monitoring the adverse effects that these masks are creating for our children in our district? I haven't heard anyone mention that at all. Or is that data that you aren't interested in? It's extremely disheartening and discouraging that no one seems to care. Our children are being harmed, and as parents, we will continue to speak up for them until you respect them enough to take their feelings into consideration. And two other things. Would it be possible to use some of the funding we received to help parents and community members at home be able to listen to these school board meetings? It's extremely difficult when you're at home to hear what's being said. And for those listening at home, please look up your school board members, candidates, and get out and vote in November unless you want to continue to have no parent choice for your children.
Ashley Bree, Skip Hack. I just want to say I appreciate those of you wearing a mask this week, but did not wear one last week. I guess COVID's not in the air last week, but it is this week. And I am also going to stand up for the children, for the K+ program, and anybody who wants to take that away from them. I don't care if it's 2 or 400. They deserve that program. Do not take that away.
Jason Saylor, Skip Back. I think you passed a flawed plan today that lacks some critical answers. I'm going to ask some questions in which I hope that over time you're able to answer. First of all, what does it mean for PVYB? Is there still going to be rental for them? Will that mean that PVYB youth sports will need to wear a mask while they're playing basketball? What does that mean for the middle school kids that are going to be playing basketball and for the wrestlers that are going to be wrestling? Will they need to be wearing a mask? That's something that wasn't addressed, but I assume since we have a mask mandate that that's going to happen. That's clearly going to bring some issues. There were issues last year with kids that had to wear a mask while participating in sports, and that wasn't addressed. We need to think about that aspect of it. Secondarily, your non-quarantine quarantine doesn't make any sense because we don't know yet if someone who's within 3 feet and not wearing a mask but is vaccinated, if they have to quarantine or not. And if we're not quarantining people, how are we really containing the virus? There is no data that is presented in the United States of America, and there's no data presented by Dr. Lorraine or no data presented by Montgomery County that says if you have one person A and one person B, both within 3 feet and both wearing a mask, but one person has COVID, that they're not systematically spreading that people to someone in that box. So now we're saying, well, we're not going to quarantine you because you wore the mask, but we know the mask is 0 to 15% efficacy. So there's a chance that that person had COVID, but we're not going to get them tested. So we're not in the game of really trying to eradicate COVID from the school district, and we're not in the game of really attempting to make sure that if someone who is immunocompromised stays healthy. We're in the game of placating and making us feel like we're doing something. And that's not the job of what we're trying to do. If we're trying to eradicate COVID in our school system, if someone has COVID and someone is sitting next to them that's 3 feet away, they should be tested. That was a true and tested policy that worked, and they made them wait 5 days. To say that, well, we're doing you a favor by not quarantining makes no sense, because the data showed last year that you did have people that were in 3 feet. But what we're doing right now is we're just coming up with nonsense. We're saying this mask works. Just dealing with the high school, where everyone should be vaccinated, teachers and students have the eligibility to all get vaccinated, we're now saying the vaccine makes no sense and it doesn't matter. So the comments that, well, when the vaccine is available for everybody, we can get rid of this, isn't true, because the vaccine is available for every student, teacher, janitor, bus driver, librarian, anyone who works in the high school. But we have now just masked everyone in the high school with a vaccine. So saying that once a vaccine comes out for K through 6, that's not necessarily a true statement. And we haven't agreed that when we go from yellow to green or moderate to low, if we're going to make any changes. We might bring it up, but now we're going to be wholly on the CDC. The CDC now has total control as a policy board, and that's not their job. They are to control diseases, right? They're to give guidance, but now they're directing policy. The governor, who I don't agree with, actually has it right. We've made and put forth a policy that 2 questions were asked about we don't have answers for. You should have amended it and got more data. You don't know what you're doing with a lot of the things with this mask policy, and you've eradicated the idea of no one should get vaccinated, because if you're 12 plus,
Mr.
you're
Saylor,
still
I
wearing a
need you to
mask.
wrap it up.
My time's up. Thank you.
Nicole Sherman, Schwenksville Borough. I just wanted to follow up on the virtual option. You're kind of putting parents in the position where you're arguing these little nitty-gritty pieces of it and then asking us to make a decision. We're all in this room trying to do what we feel is best for our students, and without an adequate answer to these questions, we can't make those decisions. I didn't answer the initial survey because I didn't know the best option for my children, and they were automatically put down to be in school. At this point, I don't have an adequate solution, and that's coming from physicians and scientists who are telling me, without X, Y, and Z in place, this isn't an option for you. So until we can get adequate guidance on what an alternative educational model is going to look like, I think we need to back off asking parents to make that decision. Because while you're all asking for the necessary information to make your decisions, you're keeping us out of the decision making by not letting us have the information that we need. And at this point, I just hope that you can take that back with you and think about the position that you're putting parents in. By not even, we are less than 3 weeks out from the start of school, and we don't know what options are available tonight. We still don't know. Thank you.
Seeing no other public comment at this time, we'll move on to 10.02 and comments from board members. And I'll just state, as I have the last couple of weeks, that any comment from a board member is not representative of the board as a whole. Is there any board member who'd like to make a comment tonight? Seeing none. 10.03, notice of video recorder disclaimer. Per policy 006.3, all video recordings are subject to the following disclaimer. The opinions expressed by any members of the public do not necessarily reflect the views or opinions of the Board of School Directors of Perkiomen Valley School District and are solely those of the presenter. The Board of School Directors of Perkiomen Valley School District hereby expressly disclaims any and all responsibility or liability for any defamatory or slanderous statements expressed by any member of the public. Any unauthorized rebroadcasting of any video, audio, and/or still image of this meeting is strictly forbidden without the written permission of the Board of School Directors of the Perkiomen Valley School District. And with that, I will adjourn tonight's meeting.